down test on this motor, you want to take your hose and install it in the number 1 cylinder after all your spark plugs are removed. Just hand tighten it. Okay, now we're going to hook our leak down tester to our compressor hose. We're going to set up the leak down tester. You want to turn your dial till your dial gauge on the right side goes all the way to the right on set. Okay, now we're going to hook our leak down tester to the hose on the motor, and we're going to turn the crank pulley to close the valves, and then we're going to read our reading on our gauge. As you can see, it's in the yellow all the way to the right. It's staying, he's holding the crank pulley by hand, and it's staying there. It would have already leaked pressure by now, so the number 1 cylinder is good. We'll go ahead and do number 2 the exact same way. Okay, now we're going to start with number 2 cylinder. Same process. I'm going to close the valves, hold it in the yellow, hold it steady. It would have leaked by now, so number 2 is good as well. Now we're going to move on to number 3. Same procedure. As far as the leak down tester gauges, the PSI on the left hand gauge, that really doesn't matter what that is. You just want to make sure your right hand gauge is set all the way to set. We have a little bit of a reduction on this one. It's still okay, but it is a reduction. We'll move on to number 4. We have a serious reduction on number 4. If you have bad compression on your cylinders like this motor has, most of these places you buy the motors from have a month startup warranty, so I would definitely send it back to get a new one, but make sure you do a leak down test within the month's warranty. Now is a good time to replace your spark plugs. We're using the NGK BKR7E. What you want to do is you want to take your spark plug and use your spark plug socket that has the rubber grommet inside it. Stick the spark plug in it just to hold it, and then insert it into the spark plug hole and start the threads on it, and then pull it out, pull the socket out. You want to do this on all 4. After you get them started, switch to your regular spark plug socket, snug them down, and then we will torque them down. The factory service manual calls for 14 to 22 foot-pounds. We're going to torque ours down to 20 foot-pounds. Okay, before you pull your transmission off, you need to remove your starter. There are 2 14mm bolts holding it on. You want to take the bottom one off first. After you get the bottom one off, you want to take the top one off and hold the starter after you break it loose. After you got it broke loose, hold the starter while you remove the bolt so the starter does not fall. Then after you get that bolt out, just pull the starter out. Okay, after you remove your starter, make sure you put your bolts back in because they're both different sizes. The bottom one is the longer one, and then the top one is the shorter one. Okay, now when you want to remove your transmission off your SR, you have 2 14mm bolts on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and remove those. After you have those two off, you have on the driver's side you have 4 17mm bolts. I'm going to remove all 4 of those. Now when you're removing the bolts, you want to keep track of where they're going because they're all different sizes. So try and keep them in a circle pattern like the transmission is on the motor, just so you don't lose which bolt goes where. Okay, on the passenger side of the transmission you have a 14mm bolt down here that you need to remove. We'll go ahead and take that one off. And then your next one is above the slave cylinder. It's a 14mm as well. We're going to go ahead and remove it. And then the next one above that is a 17mm. The next 3 are actually 17mm. Okay, now on the next 2, we're going to wait and go ahead and drop the motor down to the floor to remove those 2, just so the transmission don't fall off while it's in the air. Okay, now we're going to remove the top 2 17mm bolts. Okay, now when you want to pull your transmission off, you want to grab the back of it and pick up on it, and that's going to break the bottom off the motor, and then you're going to let down on it, and it's going to bring the top off. Because what that's doing is pulling it off the nipples. And while you're pulling it up and down, you want to be pulling back on the transmission too, so you can pull it back off the motor. And this, you can definitely do this with one person. It's not hard to do at all. Just continue wiggling and sliding back. Be careful when you get off the input shaft, and don't let the transmission fall over and tear your sensors up or anything. And it is off. Okay, when you're going to remove your clutch, I always use a 27mm socket on the crank pulley bolt, and I put it in a pipe and brace it on the floor so it does not turn. Okay, when you want to remove your clutch and flywheel, I'm showing you the new one we have here just for reference, because our motor came with a aftermarket clutch and flywheel. I have the ratchet on the crank pulley in the back to hold it so it does not spin. Take your alignment tool, insert it into the clutch disc so your disc don't fall out when you remove the pressure plate. Okay, after you have all the bolts off, grab your pressure plate and pull it off. After you have your pressure plate off, you can grab your alignment tool with your disc on it, pull it off. After you have your clutch off, you need to remove your flywheel and remove all your bolts in a crisscross pattern. There are 14mm 12-point bolts, which means you will need to use a 12-point socket. One really good trick to do is take your chain for your engine lift and go ahead and hook it onto where the pressure plate went. Turn the flywheel to tighten up the chain. You want to break all your bolts loose. Break them all loose first and then remove them. Before you take the last 2 off, turn the flywheel back to release the chain and get to remove it. The flywheel will probably be pretty tight. You can take a little pry bar and bump it on each side. Loosen it up. Make sure you do it evenly on all sides. And grab the flywheel and wiggle it off. This is the Fidanza lightweight flywheel, but the removal is the exact same as the stock one. Okay, next we're going to remove the pilot bushing. You want to use a pilot bushing removal tool. You stick it in there and it sprawls out and pretty much pulls the pilot bushing out. That's how it works. They make different kinds. You could use a slide hammer or whatnot, whatever. It just depends on how hard it is to get it out. this out. Okay, we're going to remove the power steering belt. You have a 14mm bolt hidden behind that pulley there in the access hole. So you got to turn the crank pulley, 27mm. As you can see, the 14mm bolt is showing through the access hole now. You want to loosen that, because that will actually loosen up the pump itself so it will move. You want to take it off completely, just loosen it up. And after you have that loosened, you have a 12mm nut on the bottom. That loosens up the tensioner. And then above that, you have a 12mm bolt that runs through it. That actually loosens the belt up. So you want to loosen the front one, the bottom front one first, 12mm. Just loosen that nut up. And then after you got that loose, go on top with that 12mm bolt and loosen up a good bit, because you're going to have to move the pump down a little bit just so you can release the belt off enough to get it off the pulley. And you want to push down on the pump and then remove the belt. Okay, now we're going to remove the AC belt. Our motor does not have an AC compressor on it, but we're still going to show you how to remove it. On the pulley there, you have a 14mm nut. You need to loosen that. And then after you have that loosened, there's another 14mm bolt on top that actually that moves the tensioner so you can release the belt. But since ours don't have one, you can go ahead and just pull the belt off by hand. Okay, since our motor does not have a compressor on there, I'm still going to show you where they're bolted up. They're 14mm bolts, and on the bottom side you have two bolts to there, and then to the right there. You have two more on top, right there and right there. That's where the compressor actually bolts to that bracket. Okay, we're here on the passenger side of the motor, beside the alternator. There is a 14mm nut behind there you need to loosen up so the alternator will move. After you get that nut loosened up, you want to go around to the front. Okay, after you have the back 14mm nut loosened up, you have a 12mm nut on the front here you need to loosen up. And there's also a 12mm bolt on the side that you need to loosen up to get the belt off of the alternator. Just loosen that front one up and then back off the one on the left side there. You're probably going to back it off a good bit because that belt's going through 3 pulleys, so it's going to be a little tight to get off. And after you get loosened up, you want to grab the alternator and push it towards the motor so it'll release tension. Just push the alternator over and remove the belt off. It might be a little tight. Okay, we're going to remove our crank pulley to replace our front main seal. It's a 27mm bolt. You can use the chain method on the back. Works really well so it doesn't spin on you. Ours is already broke loose, so we're just going to go ahead and remove it. You want to go ahead and remove the whole bolt, and then when you get it completely out, you want to start it into the crank, just where it starts the thread in, because you're going to need that much leeway for the pulley to come all the way off with a puller. And then on your puller, you want to hook it up to the second one. You don't want to hook it up to the pulley on the front, because as you can see, ours is chipped on the front because someone's already broken it. Because the front one is a lot thinner than the other two. You'll see that when you're looking at it. Just go ahead and hook your puller up. It just screws onto the bolt in the center of it, and then the arms grab onto the pulley. After you get it loose, you want to remove your puller and then remove the bolt so the pulley can come off. Okay, on our motor, we're going to remove our rear main seal plate and the actual oil pan on it. First of all, you want to check your oil and make sure it's all drained out. You have a 14mm bolt there, but you want to remove that and then drain your oil out. And after you get that off, you go ahead and take your first oil pan off. Okay, when you're going to remove your oil pan, you have 10mm bolts around. Okay, after you have all 10 bolts taken off, you want to take your scraper, your gasket scraper, and go around the pan. Okay, next you have two 12mm bolts holding the alternator to the oil pan. We're going to leave the two on the bottom so the bracket will stay with the oil pan and the alternator will stay with the motor. Okay, next you need to remove the plate down here. It's 7 10mm bolts to remove. Okay, when you're going to remove your last bolt, it shouldn't fall, but just in case, you want to hold the bottom of the pan. Okay, when you got all the bolts removed off the pan, you're going to pull it off. You need to use the two transmission bolts back here, one on each side there, they're the same size. You need to bring them down below. There are two threaded holes on the bottom of the pan on each side. So you want to screw those bolts in, and actually what that's going to do is push the pan off of the motor. So it's going to break the seal like that. But when you're doing this, be real careful because you want to hold the bottom of the pan, because when you get to it, it's going to make the pan drop. And the pan's a little bit heavy, so you definitely don't want to drop it and break it or damage it in any way. Okay, now after you have your bolt installed, we're going to go ahead and thread it in. It's going to go ahead and pull the pan down, so be aware that it's getting ready to fall, and it could fall at any time, depending on how good the gasket seal is on it. Okay, on this side here, it says to put the transmission bolt in here, but as you can see, there is a slot here, and this bolt will not go past right here for some strange reason. So we're going to put a crowbar in between here and bump on it. You're not going to put a lot of pressure on it, you're just going to bump on a little bit so you don't damage anything, just to get it coming off evenly on both sides. Okay, it should be coming down. You got it. Okay, bring it all the way down. Watch the pickup.
Okay.
Okay, now after we have the pan removed, we're going to replace our rear main seal. We're going to pull the plate off and reseal that as well. You have 4 10mm bolts to remove. Remove them in a crisscross pattern. If you wanted to remove your rear main seal without doing all this, without moving the pan and all that stuff, all you have to do is take a flathead screwdriver and pry the seal out, and then just install your new one. It's a little difficult to do it that way, but it is possible to do that. But now we're going to go ahead and break our gasket loose for our plate there. You just want to take a gasket scraper or a 5-in-1 tool like that and a hammer, and then tap on it until it breaks the gasket loose. You have a nipple on each side. So break your gasket loose and then pull the plate off of the nipples. Okay, now the plate's on the ground. You need to brace it down. We're going to step on it on each side and use a seal puller to pull the seal out. Okay, now you want to turn the plate over and scrape all the gasket off of it. When you get done with that, make sure you check the bottom side too, if it has old gasket left on it. You don't have to get it perfect, just get as much off as you can, because the better you get, the better it'll seal. Okay, next you want to scrape all the old gasket off around where the plate was on the crankshaft. When you get done scraping it all off, you want to take like a blue paper towel or whatever, a shop towel, and just wipe it off real good so it's real smooth and ain't got no dirt or corrosion on it or anything. I wouldn't use the red rags because they leave a lot of lint. So when you're working on motors, leave the red rags alone. Just clean off as good as you can. Like I said before, it does not have to be perfect, but the cleaner you get, the better seal you're going to get. And the whole reason we're doing this is get a good seal and make it last longer and seal longer. So spend a little extra time on that. Okay, next underneath the motor, you need to scrape the old gasket off the bottom here, just like you've done before. This right here, make sure you get it really, really clean, because you definitely don't want this oil pan to leak. because if it leaks, you're going to have to pull it back off, and it's a pain in the butt doing the car, almost impossible. Just take your time and be easy with it, and definitely do not gouge anything or scratch anything, or else you will have a leak. Okay, we're going to go ahead and remove our AC bracket now, just so it's going to be easier for us to clean that side of the rail there. It has 4 14mm bolts on it. You definitely want to use a breaker bar on these, they're probably pretty tight. Like I said before, it's probably best to go ahead and remove this bracket before you even mess with the oil pan and stuff. When you go to take the last bolt off, hold the bracket because it's going to fall off. One bolt is smaller, it's that one right there. The rest of the other 3 are all the same size. And now we'll continue scraping. And then when you get done scraping, wipe it all down with a blue rag or shop towel or whatever you got. Just stay away from the red rags because they leave way too much lint. And then on your oil pan, you want to go ahead and scrape it just like you scrape the rest of them. When you get done with this side, we're going to flip it over and do the other side. But make sure you get all your old gasket that you cut off. Make sure there's none in the oil pan. Make sure you get all that out. And you could probably spray it with some carburetor cleaner to clean it up good too before you go to put it back on. Your side right here probably won't be as bad as ours if yours is OEM, but the motor we got had a lot of aftermarket stuff done to it already, so this pan has been removed and replaced before, so that's why it's got all this orange gasket all over it, and they put a good bit on there. So we're going to do a good bit of scraping to clean ours off. Okay, now we're going to put the rear main oil seal into the plate. What you want to do is take it out of the bag and cover the whole seal in motor oil. Just get some motor oil on your fingers and just get it all over the oil seal so it'll seal up really good, and also so it'll go into the hole of the plate easier. So I would ring it around the inside of the plate one good time too, just to lubricate the inside of that. And after you get the front side, turn the seal around and do the inside of the other side of it. Make sure you get good oil coverage all over the seal. You want to get a little ring around the plate itself just so it'll slide in there a little easier. And when you get that lubed up, lay the plate down flat, and you're going to press the seal in by hand. There's a little lip on the inside on the back side of the plate, so the seal will only go so far and it'll stop. But you want to get it flush and flat evenly all the way around, or else you'll have an oil leak. If it's real hard to go on, you could take a rubber mallet and tap on it. Don't hit it really hard. Don't dent the seal or bend the seal in any way. As it's going in, just keep turning the plate around to check to make sure it's touching the ring on the back, because when it gets so far it won't go any further. Once it's good and flush all the way around, you're good to go ahead and put some RTV on it and put it on the motor. Okay, now we're going to RTV our rear main seal plate. You want to put it down the center of the plate and go on the inside of the bolt holes. And make sure you keep a constant and steady bead going all the way from one end to the other. You don't want any kind of skips or anything, or else you'll end up with leaks. You don't have to put too much on there, but you don't want to put too little neither. Because when you go to put it on there, it's gonna squeeze it out and flatten it out anyways, but you want it to be thick enough so it'll get a good seal. And you do not have to do the bottom of it. The bottom of it will get RTV from the oil pan. When you go to put the oil pan on, it'll seal up the bottom of it. Okay, we're going to put our rear main seal and a plate back on the motor. We've already wiped motor oil around the crank just to help it guide the seal over it. So what you want to do, so you don't mess up your RTV on the back of your plate, is you want to get the seal on the crank first. So we'll go ahead and do that now. You kind of want to sit it over it and kind of sort of twist it back and forth a little bit, just so the seal will wrap around the crank. And then once you get it on the crank, then you'll be able to line the nipples up. Just be patient. It will go on. Just got to kind of work around it. After you have it on there, straighten it up with the nipples and then press it on. And then go ahead and bolt your bolts down. They're only torqued down to like 6.1 foot-pounds, which is not much at all. We do it in a crisscross pattern so the RTV will seal and seat properly and evenly. As you tighten it down, you should see RTV ooze out the edges in between the plate and the motor. That means it's going to seal up really good. Okay, now we're going to RTV the oil pan. Make sure you keep a continuous bead all the way down. You can always go back later and patch it up if you need to. Okay, we're getting ready to put the oil pan back on the bottom of the motor. This is definitely a two-man job. You want somebody to hold it up while the other person bolts it up. You got the bolt, you got the studs right here, and then you got two nipples on the bottom of the motor there. So that will definitely line it up for you. You just gotta get the other person to help you line it up, because you want to get it on there perfectly, or else your RTV will mess up. Are we in?
Yep.
Okay, and once you get it up in there, smash it up on there and go ahead and start bolting them down. You gotta torque it down in numerical order, but we're going to go ahead and just install the bolts. Because you don't have to put them in numerical order, you just got to torque them down in numerical order. Just make sure you put them back in the right spot where they went to begin with. Once you get the initial 4 just snug down, you can go ahead and start doing it in numerical order. Because basically what you're going to do is the opposite of removal. You're going to start on the inside and work your way out. So you have these 4 here. We're going to go ahead and just snug them up, and I will show you the pattern you need to torque them up in. Okay, when you get over here, you're going to have to use a regular ratchet because your normal torque wrench won't work on there. So you should have pretty much a feel of what 14 to 16 foot-pounds feels like. So just pretty much snug them down to what you feel is comfortable. Number 17 and 18 is on the back, 10mm nuts. You want to go back over all of them again with your torque wrench, starting with number 1, just to make sure everything is torqued down properly. And make sure to put your 2 12mm bolts back on the bottom of the alternator bracket. Okay, now we're going to install our plate back on. The bolts torqued down to 5.5 foot-pounds. Just go ahead and snug them on there to hold the plate on, then we'll go back and torque it. The plate will only go on one way. Okay, now we're going to install the baffles on the Grady oil pan. One side is deeper than the other, so you use the longer side on that one, and then the shorter one on the shallower side. It has Phillips head screws that come with it with locking washers. I would add some Loctite onto your threads just for added insurance. Next, before you install it, you want to go ahead and scrape all the old RTV liquid gasket off of the bottom of the oil pan. Now we're going to RTV the oil pan. Make sure you go on the inside of the bolt holes. And keep a continuous bead all the way around. There are 5mm Allen bolts that goes in it. You have the sides here. It gets the short ones on both sides, and then the 4 on the bottom get the longer ones. And as you can see, you have the indention right here. You have the indention on the top oil pan too is going to go in there. But we're going to go ahead and hold 2 bolts, one on this side, one on this side, and we're going to hold it up here and thread them in just like we did the water pump, just so you don't get any RTV messed up anywhere. So you go ahead and thread a bolt in before you actually touch the RTV to the oil pan. And if you get those 2 snugged in, go ahead and install the rest of your bolts. You're going to have to tighten them in a sequence. Okay, the Grady oil pan does not come with the oil plug, so you can just use your stock plug. Just screw it in there. Okay, if you were using the stock oil pan, it would be the same tighten sequence as this one. Okay, now we're going to take the drain plug off to drain the water out of the block. It's a 14mm bolt right there. Okay, our motor did not have very much water left in it. Just kind of tilt the motor over a little bit while it's on the lift and get out as much as you can. Okay, now we're going to put some RTV on the drain plug. You just want to take it and put it in the center of the thread right there. That's about where it stops at on the block. Just kind of turn the plug around. Just get a little bit on it because it's going to smooth out as you turn it in anyways. It's going to seal it up. That's good right there. Then we'll bring it up to the block. Go ahead and hand thread it into the block. After you got it threaded into the block, go ahead and snug it down. And then we'll torque it down to 32 foot-pounds. It's 32 to 34 foot-pounds, so use your own judgment on that, but we're going to torque it down to 32. Alright, we're going to remove our water pump and replace it. So we want to go ahead and pull the pulley off. It's 4 10mm nuts holding it on. You want to hold the pulley while you break them loose. Then you go ahead and pull the pulley off. Now that you have the pulley off, have 6 12mm bolts. You want to remove them all in a crisscross pattern. Okay, after you have all the bolts removed, you want to hold the bottom of the water pump and then tap the wheel with a rubber mallet to break the seal loose and break it off the motor. It will leak a little water, so have rags below. And your water pump is off. Let it drain all the water out. And then we'll go ahead and clean off the old gasket. Just pick up on the back side of the motor while it's on the lift and drain it all out as much as you can. Okay, now we're going to scrape off the old gasket on the water pump, just like we did on the oil pan. I'm going to get it cleaned off really good. Okay, since your new water pump does not come with the studs for the water pump pulley, since the ones that are on your old water pump are usually rusted on there and hard to get off, you're going to take your two nuts that held the water pump pulley on, put one on and then put another one on, and then tighten them up with each other, and then turn the first one you put on with a wrench to break the stud loose off of the water pump. Okay, now you have it off. You need to remove the nuts and do it on all the other three. Okay, you want to take your studs and install them on your new water pump. The shorter thread goes into the water pump and the longer side goes outside the water pump. But they'll probably be tight to go in by hand, so you want to do the nut method like we did when we took them off. And we'll turn it all the way till it stops. You don't have to torque it down or anything, just get it to where it stops. And then remove the nuts and do the rest of them. Okay, now we're going to seal up the water pump with RTV. Like all the rest of it, go inside the bolt holes and in the middle everywhere else. And keep a consistent bead all the way around. Okay, now when you're getting ready to put your water pump onto the motor, go ahead and put two bolts through the water pump, one on top and one on the bottom, and hold it up there and start the thread on the first bolt, but do not push the water pump onto the motor because you'll mess up the RTV. The reason for doing the top and the bottom is to get the bolt holes lined up with the water pump to the motor, and then you're going to press the water pump to the motor so you can seal the RTV, and then you're going to snug those two bolts down, and then you're going to install the rest of your bolts.
Okay, just push it down now.
Yes. Now, tighten them down. So it will not move. You want to do it all in a crisscross pattern, hand tight, just so you get the sealing all the way around. And then we'll go back and we'll torque them. When you get your last bolt snug on there, hand tight, the FSM calls for 12 to 16 foot-pounds. We're going to torque ours down to 15.5 and do that in a crisscross pattern as well. Once again, go smooth strokes, and don't go really fast. Go real smooth and slow so you get proper torque. After you do your last bolt, go back to number 1 again and check the torque on all of them. Make sure they're all torqued down. Okay, now we're going to remove our front main seal and replace it. Okay, now we're going to pull our seal out. You want to go slowly and make sure you're not going to scratch or gouge the inside of the cover out. And it's out. Okay, we're going to go install our new seal. You want to cover the seal in motor oil like we did the rear oil seal. Do the top and the bottom of it and the outsides of it. And also on the inside of the timing cover in the hole there, you want to put some motor oil in there just so the seal will install easier. Okay, when you get your oil seal covered, you want to put it up through the hole and smash it in by hand. You want to get it evenly and flush all the way around. And it'll only go back so far. It has a little lip on the back of the cover there, so the seal will only go back so far. Make sure you have the seal turned the right way. That right there is the back side, which goes into the motor, and then the other side is the outside. We'll go ahead and install it into the hole now. You want to push it in there by hand. You want it to be flat and flush all the way around. You don't want to go in so far and it'll stop. If you can't get it all the way back by hand, you can use a rubber mallet to tap it in, but be extra careful. Do not dent it or damage the seal in any way, or it will leak and you'll have to get a new one. Basically, you'll know it is installed all the way when the seal is flush with the metal on the cover. That's how you'll know it's all the way in. Okay, now we're going to remove our AIV tube to our turbo elbow. It's a 24mm bolt on the turbo elbow. You probably have to use channel locks to break it loose. Definitely shoot that with some WD-40 and let it sit a while, because those get rusted on and they're hard to get off. Okay, after you get that off, you have 4 12mm bolts holding the AIV unit to the motor. That bracket there, we're going to remove all 4 of those. The bottom bolts are longer than the top bolts. You need to note this because you're going to need to use the 2 shorter bolts on the box to the right there to hold that on. Okay, after you get the last bolt off, you have a 10mm bolt holding the tube to the manifold. You need to remove that. And when you get that bolt off, you should be able to grab the whole unit and pull the tube off along with the unit. All of it together as one. After you get it off, you want to take the 2 shortest bolts that held the bracket on to the motor and install them back into the box right there to hold that onto the motor. You can remove that box completely if you want to. I'd probably torque those down to 14-15 foot-pounds. Okay, we're going to remove our turbo heat shield. You have 5 10mm bolts holding it on. We're going to remove those. You definitely want to shoot all these bolts with WD-40 and let them sit for a little while before you remove all this stuff, because they get stuck on it really good. And then go ahead and just pull the whole heat shield off. Okay, next we're going to remove our O2 sensor from our stock turbo elbow, because we're going to use an aftermarket elbow and this sensor is in good shape. So it's a 17mm bolt holding it on. Okay, next you have another heat shield on there, but you're just going to remove that while you remove the turbo elbow. But you have 3 13mm bolts and 2 13mm nuts holding it on. So we'll go ahead and break all those loose. The one on the bottom right there, you're probably going to have to use a thin wall wrench to get that off, because it's really tight. It's a really tight spot. And you can't fit a ratchet and socket into it. And the one on the bottom left is the same way. You're going to use a wrench on it as well. Like before, you definitely want to shoot all these with WD-40 and let them sit for a while before you go to remove them. Anything to do with an exhaust at all, you definitely want to shoot it with WD-40 and let it sit for a while, because that stuff gets stuck on there really good. When you remove that bottom nut on the left side, that heat shield will come off. After you get the last bolt off, just pull the turbo elbow straight back and it'll come off. It's on 2 studs. Go ahead and remove your gasket as well. Okay, after you have the turbo elbow off, you have access to your turbo wheel there. You want to grab it in the middle and move it up and down or side to side to check for shaft play. A little bit of movement is normal, but a lot is not. And you want to do the same thing to spin the wheel freely and make sure it spins freely. And then just check for leaks everywhere. You can go through the factory service manual, and there's a lot of steps that you can go through checking all your seals and everything. Next thing, you have a gasket from the turbo to the manifold. Just grab the turbo and try and move it around if you can, and that'll That'll tell you if that gasket's bad or not in between there. Usually when they go bad, they have a little bit of play in there. You can move the turbo around just a little bit, but ours is in good shape. Okay, if you're going to use the stock elbow, you need to plug the AIV hole. To do this, you need to cut the AIV tube and remove the bolt from it. Place a nickel in the AIV hole. Install the bolt and tighten the bolt down, and that will plug the hole. They also make AIV plugs that you can purchase, but this is a cheaper and just as effective method. Okay, if you're going to use an aftermarket turbo elbow like we're going to do, there's a couple things you need to involve yourself with. You need to take the stock bolt and thread it in on the bottom left side first, because the runners are bent down. It will not go in there easily. You want to screw it in there and then take your wrench and screw it in there, but be extra careful not to ruin the threads. It will fit in there. Just be extra careful with it. After you get it in there, install your gasket onto your turbo. We're using our stock one because it's in good shape. If yours is in bad shape, you need to replace it. Take the elbow, install it onto the turbo, and thread that bolt in that you just put in the elbow. Then after you get it just a little way started on, you want to go ahead and start your nuts on the bottom side, because they're going to be hard to get in too. Because if you take the elbow and push it all the way up against the turbo, you will not be able to install the nuts onto the studs. So you need to do all three of those on the bottom first. The two nuts on the bottom and the one bolt. They're all 13 millimeter. Just go ahead and thread them all the way down to where the elbow meets the turbo. And you need to do all of them a little bit at a time so they all go evenly. And keep it flush, so you don't get any snags on the bolt to the runner or the nut to the runner. After you get all those down, snug down, go ahead and put your other bolts on the top side. And as you can note, there is no hole for where the AIV tube would go, so you do not have to plug that on this one. And it also has a hole that you can install your O2 sensor. We have a plug on ours right now. And as far as torquing these down, it's going to be really hard to get a torque wrench on there, so I would get them really snug, evenly all the way around in a crisscross pattern. Of course, the ones on the bottom you definitely have to use the wrench for. Just get them tight enough where you know it will not leak, where it'll seal the gasket up good. If you want to install your heat shields back on there, you can. We're not going to do ours, but I would definitely recommend putting them back on there just to control the heat in the car, because turbos definitely do make a lot of heat. And the more you can cut down on that, the better off you will be. Okay, we're going to install our pilot bushing. First thing you want to do is put some grease inside the hole. This is going to help the pilot bushing slide inside the hole easier. Then what I like to do is take the pilot bushing and put it on an alignment tool and knock it in like that with a hammer, just so you get it going in straight and level and everything, so you don't warp it. Because if you warp it or damage it in any way, the transmission is not going to go in there. So this is the best method to do. It will not knock it in all the way, but when you get to the point of where it won't go any further, you want to take the ball peen side of the hammer and just lightly tap it in all the way till it's flush. And when it's flush, that's good enough. If it needs to go back any more, the transmission will knock it back all the way. But that's it as far as the pilot bushing goes. Okay, before you install your flywheel, make sure your dust plate is on. If it's not, install it. You can tell it's on properly by the starter hole. And it has two nipples it hooks to, one on top, one on the bottom left side. Okay, we're going to install our flywheel. We're using the Fidanza lightweight flywheel. Just line the bolt holes up with the bolt holes on the crankshaft. And then thread a bolt in on the top while you're holding it. You want to hand thread all your bolts on, and then we'll go back when we get that done and snug them down with a regular ratchet and socket. And then after that, we'll torque them down to spec. Make sure you install Loctite on your threads, just for added insurance. The bolts we're using are 14mm 12 point. When you're going to snug these up, make sure you're going to crisscross pattern a little bit at a time, so it will go on there evenly and flat. Ooh. We're going to go ahead and torque them down to 100 foot-pounds. You want to do smooth strokes. After you got them all torqued, go back around and make sure they're all torqued. Okay, now we're going to install our clutch disc. You want to pick it up without touching the disc itself because you can cause it to slip. Put the alignment tool in the hole, then pick it up and install it into the pilot bushing hole. Push it all the way back and then push the clutch disc all the way back to the flywheel. After you have that on, then we're going to grab the pressure plate, and you're going to want to align the pressure plate holes up with the nipples on the flywheel. It'll be the middle holes. Let me show you here. There's 3 holes on the pressure plate there. It'll be the middle holes that you're going to line them up with. Okay, after you have it on there, you want to go ahead and start your bolts in the bolt hole. Just thread them on by hand. You have to do this in a pattern. We're just going to go ahead and thread them on to hold the pressure plate on there for right now. Okay, after you have all your bolts installed and snug down, you need to tighten and torque in a pattern. There are 9 bolts total. They're all in sets of 3. You have 3 sets of 3. You have 1 on top, 1 on the right, and 1 on the left, depending on which way your clutch is sitting. You need to start with number 1, which is a middle bolt. And what you're going to do is you're going to go all the way around on all the middle bolts in that sequence. And then after you get to the last one, then you're going to go to the first set you went to and you're going to start with the left bolt from the middle one. And you're going to do that on each set. Then after you get done with that, you're going to go back to your first one and you're going to start with the right bolt, and you're going to do that on all the sets. And that's basically your torque pattern. And now we're going to torque them down. The factory service manual calls for 25 to 33 foot-pounds. We're going to torque ours down to 33 foot-pounds in the pattern we just went over. I also forgot to add, make sure you install Loctite on the threads of your bolts, just for added insurance. Doing all your middles first. You want to do your left sides. And then you want to do your right sides. Okay, next you want to go ahead and just pull your alignment tool out. Okay, now we're going to pull the water neck off to replace the thermostat. There are 3 10mm bolts holding on. Go ahead and remove those. And after you get all the bolts off, you want to take a rubber mallet or just a regular hammer and tap on it to break the RTV loose. Don't hit it really hard, just tap it off. After you got that off, you can see the thermostat is installed in there. You want to remove the thermostat out. Then you want to get all the sealant off all the parts and off the motor. So we can get ready to seal everything up and install it back on. Okay, now we're going to install the thermostat onto the motor. Make sure you have it facing the right way. It has a little plunger thing on it at the top. Then you want to take your water neck with RTV around it, install it onto the motor, and then install the bolts. After you get them all snugged on there, we're going to torque them down to 5.5 foot-pounds. Okay, we're going to go ahead and remove our motor mounts and replace them with some new ones. We're going to go ahead and remove the bracket from the intake manifold to the motor. On the bottom there's supposed to be a 14mm bolt. It's already gone, but there's supposed to be a 14mm bolt there, and there's two 12mm bolts on top. You got to remove those. Okay, next you have the motor mount to the motor mount bracket. It's a 14mm nut. You really want to use a deep well, but it's hard to get it in there, so you could possibly get a regular socket in there. If not, use a wrench. Because what it is, it actually has a stud that comes up off the motor mount, and that stud sticks up, so it makes it harder for the regular socket to fit on it. But we had just enough clearance to get a regular socket on there. And as you can see, there's a bracket on the motor mount there. We're going to keep that and put it back on our new motor mounts, because that actually holds the harness. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the bracket off the motor mount. It's a 12mm nut. Okay, we're going to go ahead and install that bracket onto our motor mounts. We're using the Cusco motor mounts. They have the studs on them, just like the stock ones do. Go ahead and use your stock nut, thread it on there with the bracket. As far as the Cuscos, it don't matter which side goes on which side, because the motor mounts are both the same. You have the bolts and nuts on each side of the motor mount. Where you actually tighten those up, it'll stiffen it up more, so they're somewhat adjustable. Just snug it down and it'll be good enough. Now we're going to install our motor mount onto our bracket. As you see there's a nipple on the motor mount and then a notch on the motor mount bracket. That's what goes inside there. It points upward like that. And use your stock 14mm nut. Might be a little tight going on because you got the paint on the stud there, but the stock nut will work, depending on which motor mount you use, of course. After you get it snug on there, the factory service manual calls for 32 to 41 foot-pounds. We're going to torque ours at 41 foot-pounds. As far as all the torque settings on all this stuff, use your own judgment on that. I normally go with the higher number, but that's just my preference. Okay, on the Cusco motor mounts, you have the adjusters to stiffen them up if you want to. We're going to torque ours down to 30 foot-pounds on each side, just to keep it a constant rate. There's no specification on that, that's just preference really, but that's what we're going to do ours at. Okay, we're going to replace our valve cover gasket, so you want to go ahead and remove the two hoses that hold it on. After you have those off, you want to remove the valve cover in a sequence. And now you can go ahead and remove all the caps. And after you get all those off, you can pull the valve cover up. Okay, now we're going to pull the valve cover gasket off and the spark plug gaskets. It's just down in the channel there. Okay, now you have that out, we're going to install the new ones. Just press them into the channels. Then your valve cover is the same way, just press it into the channel. It'll only go on there one way. So when you're getting ready to install your valve cover, you need to take some RTV and put it a little bead all the way down each channel. You have 4 channels, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. Just a little bit. And you want to do the fronts. Okay, now you can take your valve cover and install it onto the motor. Make sure that your little half moons seal up properly onto the head. You'll squeeze a little bit of RTV out. Watch your hoses when you're coming down. And then when you're down on there, go ahead and thread your bolts, and well, go ahead and put your rubber washers on and thread the bolts on there. You go ahead and thread your nuts on. Just start them on there, don't tighten them up at all. Okay, next you want to torque them down in sequence. Factory service manual calls for 5.2 to 7.8 foot-pounds. We're going to torque ours down to 7 foot-pounds. Now starting with number 1. Okay, if you have a S14 motor, this is a S13 motor, you have 2 more bolts on the valve cover on the front side. So that'll be a 13, there'll be 14 and a 15th bolt will go there because it has a hump on the outside of it there. Okay, now you want to install your hoses back on. Okay, now you can go ahead and install your coil pack harness. Go ahead and install your coils onto the spark plug holes. You have a ground to bolt down, a 12mm bolt there. It actually holds it's got a holder for your harness there too. Go ahead and tighten that one down. Then you have two 12mm bolts to the right there that holds that bracket on. Go ahead and tighten those down. Make sure you install your 10mm bolts that hold your coil packs down to the valve cover. There are 4 of them, one on each coil pack. Okay, we're going to move the black box on the back here. You can leave it hooked on if you want, but we're not. You have the two 12mm bolts on the left hand side that we installed earlier from the AIV unit. You have one more on the right side. And then you have a hose below there to remove. We're going to remove all the bolts. Okay, as you see, the black box goes to a rubber line, which goes to a hard line to the block. We're going to leave the hard line on the block and remove the rubber hose with the black box. And it is off. Okay, now we're going to do the heater hose connections. On the bottom right there is where the S-shaped hose is going to go. And to do that, you're going to have to remove that hose. So you're going to have to pull the clamp off and then pull the hose off. After you get that hose off, there you're going to have to remove the bracket to remove the hard line. There are 3 12mm bolts holding it on. One there, and one behind the coil pack there. So you're going to have to move the coil pack harness out to access that bolt. And remove all 3 of those 12mm bolts. Make sure you keep track of the bolts because they are different sizes. Okay, next you want to install your bolt back in that holds your ground on and holds your holder for your coil pack harness. Okay, next you need to remove the rubber line on the hard line there. It's an 8mm clamp. Okay, what you're going to do on that, you're going to use the U-shaped hose on that hose you just took off, on that hard line you just took off. And then you're going to use the L-shaped hose on that to go to the firewall. That's how that one's going to work. And then of course the one on the bottom right is going to be the S-shaped hose. and you're going to have to cut them all to size when you get them in the car. But I would definitely go ahead and recommend installing the U-shaped hose in now, because it's going to be really hard to get to behind the motor while it's in the car. Before you go to install that hose, I'd put a little bit of motor oil on the hard line just to help and install easier. Make sure you twist the hose so the hose is pointing flat with the motor. Then tighten your clamp down. Okay, now we're going to install the joining piece onto the hose. Make sure you put a clamp on before you put the joining piece on. Here on the back of the intake manifold, you have the heater core connection from the motor to the firewall. This one on the back of the intake manifold here goes to the bottom one on the firewall here, and it uses the S-shaped hose. So we're going to go ahead and stick that in there and show you about where you're going to have to cut it. You're going to have to cut it on both sides. So as you can see, it'll fit to the firewall, but back at the back of the intake manifold, it's going into the curve, so it needs to come forward a little bit. So you want to cut off a little bit on the front side there, and then cut off some more on the back side. Okay, we cut 1.25 inches off on the car side, the side that goes to the firewall. Cut 1.25 inches off that. The side that goes to the motor, we cut off 2 5/8 inches on that side. This is if you use the heater hoses from Heavy Throttle. We're going to go ahead and install it on the car, show you how it fits. The reason you want to cut these is so you do not get any kind of kinks in the hoses at all. As you can see, there's no kinks, and it goes to each side really well. Okay, as far as the top heater core inlet on the car, on the firewall there, the L-shaped hose is going to go in there. As you can see, it's a little long, so we're going to have to cut that to size to go to the firewall, because it hooks to your U hose right here, which came on the back of the motor. We already installed earlier, but you want to go ahead and cut this off to size where you need it to get it close to the firewall. Okay, the hose here, we cut it at 2 1/4 inch going to the firewall there. Now we got this one cut, and we got it tucked under the lip here. We cut this one at 4 5/8 inch on the back there. And as you can see, it fits really good right behind the motor. No kinks anywhere. It's going to work really well. Okay, here on the back of the coil pack harness, you have a loop. That is actually what you hook your timing light to, so you need to leave that looped up, pointing upward so you can get to it while the motor is installed in the car. Okay, on the hard line on the right side there for your heater hose, we're leaving that on because we're using the stock T25 turbo, which is water cooled, and it has a water line on it there, which goes down to the turbo. As you can see, there's a bracket there that used to hook to the bracket that was there before, so you cannot hook that bracket up. So you do not need that anymore. You can take it off, but you need to leave that line there for your water for your turbo. On your transmission, after you drained all your transmission fluid out of it, you want to torque your drain plug back. You want to torque it to 25 foot-pounds. We're going to remove the slave cylinder because we're going to use the ones on the car. There are 2 14mm bolts. Probably want to use a breaker bar because they're pretty tight. Now we're going to replace our reverse lamp switch, as ours is damaged. It's a 19mm. Okay, now we're going to replace our neutral position switch, which is obviously broken, 19mm. That is your vehicle speed sensor to the left of it there. Okay, now you're going to put a little bit of Teflon tape on the threads of the sensor, or you could use some liquid thread sealant if you wanted to, either way. And after you get the Teflon tape threaded on, install it into the motor. And then tighten it down with a 19mm. Tighten it up enough so it won't leak. Okay, next we're going to do our neutral position sensor. You want to Teflon tape it, or use thread sealant, liquid thread sealant. After you get that done, you want to install it onto the transmission. And tighten it up with a 19mm. Snug it down real good so it won't leak. Okay, now we're going to remove the transmission mount, which is obviously no good. Two 14mm nuts holding it on. You have little bolts on the other side of it that'll want to come out too. They look like T's. Okay, now we're going to install our transmission mount. We're using the Nismo mount. You want to install your stock bolts and nuts, or you can just use some different ones you get from the hardware store, which is what we're doing. The Nismo mount mounts up in the stock location. Go ahead and tighten them bolts down. Okay, now we're going to install our cross member. Make sure the sides that are pointing up point toward the back of the transmission. Install a little bit of Loctite on your threads. Okay, now we're going to pull our throwout bearing off the transmission. You just grab the back of the throwout bearing, pull it forward, and it will pull it off the fork and off of the transmission. Okay, the holder spring there, how it has the tips on it, those tips actually go on the opposite side of the fork. So you need to note that, so when you go back to install it, you install it properly. Okay, now we're going to remove the throwout bearing off the release sleeve. Use a 30mm socket, place it on top of the release sleeve, and take a hammer and knock it out. Okay, when you're going to install your throwout bearing on your release sleeve, this is your release sleeve right here, and this is your throwout bearing. I just put mine in a vise and put two boards on each side, just so it don't damage them. And then just tighten up the vise. It'll go all the way down till they both touch each other. Make sure you get the throwout bearing started on the release sleeve first and get it going straight. After you get it installed in there, you'll see it's all the way down and pushed all the way into it. And on your throwout bearing, you got a side that spins on it. It's got this little piece on it that spins right here. Make sure that's pointing out and not into this side, because this is what touches your pressure plate. Okay, now we're going to remove the fork. Just grab it and pull it off the rubber boot. Okay, now we're going to grease up the nipple that was behind the fork there. Just put just a little bit of grease on the ball of it there. Not a lot, just a little bit. Okay, now we're going to put a little grease on the shaft of the front cover there. And we're going to put a little grease on the shaft with the teeth on it that goes inside the clutch. And then on the tip of it, we're going to put a little more grease too that goes inside the pilot bushing. Just a little bit, you don't need a lot. Okay, now we're going to install the fork back in. Okay, on the back of your fork there you have that spring. Put a little grease on it, make sure it's in the slots. Then you want to install it back into the dust sleeve. Slide it down in there, line it up with the nipple on the back. Then go ahead and bring your throwout bearing in. Make sure your holder spring is in the right direction. Pull your fork forward, install it onto the release sleeve with the holder spring while you're pushing back on it. When you get that in, then you want to push the fork all the way back onto the nipple. And it is installed. Okay, we're going to move the dust sleeve because it gets in the way of the drive shaft. You could actually cut it in half if you want to. We're just going to remove it completely. Okay, you need to take some brake cleaner and spray it on a blue rag to clean the throwout bearing off. If you got any grease on it or any oil at all, because that will definitely make your clutch slip. It's just a piece that turns on the throwout bearing. You need to clean it off really good. You also want to go ahead and remove your shifter off your SR. It's the same as the KA. Okay, when you're going to install your transmission, as you see, the input shaft here has teeth on it. On the inside of the clutch disc, it has teeth on it as well. That's what's going to be hard to get to go in there. You got to get those teeth to line up with these teeth and slide in. Then after you get that on, you have a nipple right here, and you have another nipple right here that you need to get the transmission to line up on. Because there's holes in the back of the transmission to line them up on. And after you get those on, you're good to go. You can bolt it up. But that's going to be your hard part. So when you're bringing the transmission in, if it's not wanting to go in, then your teeth's not lined up. You need to pull it off. Take your input shaft, turn it just a little bit, like probably about that much there, and then try it again. And continue trying until you get it to go in. Okay, now we're going to install our transmission onto the motor. Okay, the teeth's not lined up, so we're going to pull it back off and turn the input shaft just a little bit. This is going to be the time-consuming part. Sometimes you hit it on the first try, and sometimes it takes 20 tries. Remember, you need to line the input shaft teeth to the clutch teeth. And then after you get that lined up, you need to get the nipples on the motor lined up with the transmission. Alright, after you have it lined up and you have it pushed in, go ahead and install some bolts. And if you kept them all in order, this is where it's going to pay off. Because you won't have to fondle around with all of them trying to figure out which one went where. And after you get them all installed, we'll go ahead and torque them down. Okay, we're going to go install and starter now. Remember, the longer bolt is on the bottom and the shorter bolt is on the top. We're going to torque our starter bolts to 39 foot-pounds. Okay, we're going to install our transmission harness. Our speed sensor wire connector was broken, so we straight wired ours in. Okay, next up is your neutral position sensor. I'm going to go ahead and connect that in. And then next down the line is your reverse lamp switch. You got a couple hold downs for the wires, so you want to go ahead and just hook them up. You got some for the hose too. That's just a vent hose. Okay, you need to take the vent tube bracket and bolt onto the transmission bolt on the top right. What that does is it gets the vent tube up higher than the gearbox, so the gearbox gets a vent. Okay, we're going to go install our wiring on our starter. You have a 12mm nut, a lock washer, and then below that you have a post. We're going to hook that up. The one with the rubber boot goes on the stud up top with the lock washer and the nut. Just got to pull the rubber boot back. You want to take the rubber boot, cover it back up, cover up the nut and the stud and everything, and then take your next connection and slide it onto the post. It just slides on there. Okay, next in line will be your oil pressure sending unit, which we're using our Defi oil pressure gauge in it in that port, so we're not using the stock one, but that's where it would go if you were to use it. And then the connector for it is the one with the rubber boot on it there. Just tape it up out of the way if you're not using it. Okay, on the alternator you have a 10mm nut with a locking washer on the stud there. Right above that you have a connector, and then right above that you have a 8mm bolt. The connector with the rubber boot on it goes on the bottom with the 10mm nut and washer. Okay, then the middle one is the connector. Just push it in. And then the one up top takes a small eyelet. And take your rubber boot, cover up the nut and stud, and you're done. Okay, if you want to, you can install your intake manifold bracket back on. We're not going to, but that is how it would look when it's installed. Okay, we're going to install our AC bracket back on the motor. Your shorter bolt goes on the top left side. The other 3 bolts are all the same size. They're all 14mm. We're going to torque them down to 41 foot-pounds. Okay, here on the passenger side of the car you have the brake booster line, which with the SRs they have the right-hand drive car, so it's pointing the wrong direction. So you'll want to use your KA brake booster line. But to take this one off, you have a 10mm bolt right there on the intake manifold, and then down below you have a clamp for the hose. So you just remove the clamp, pull the hose off, and disconnect the 10mm bolt. Okay, we're going to go install our KA brake booster line onto the SR. You want to go ahead and install it onto the nipple there, onto the intake manifold. You have the stock bracket for the KA that you're going to need to move down. Or that bracket there is going to need to move down to the spot where the SR harness hooked to. So you're going to move it down there. You can get and hook the clamp up on the bottom too, so it don't pull the hose back off. That is a 10mm bolt. Okay, if you ever have to remove your turbo inlet pipe, you need to seal it back up. So just take a little bit of RTV and go around it. Just a little bit. Just get a little bit all the way around like that. Go ahead and insert it onto the turbo. It has 2 12mm nuts holding on. I torque down probably about 12 to 14 foot-pounds. Okay, we're going to change our power steering pump pulley. The best way to do that is use a air gun, because if you do it with your hand and a regular ratchet, it's near impossible to do. It's a 19mm bolt. You want to hold the pulley while you take the impact gun and shoot the bolt. Shoot it with some WD-40 to loosen it up. There's a lock washer on there that comes off, and then the pulley should slide right off. Okay, we're going to install the pulley back on. The deeper side goes towards the motor, where the shallower side goes on the outside of the motor. And it has teeth on the inside of it, so it hooks to the teeth on the power steering pump. Just slide it on there. Okay, this pulley kit comes with a locking nut, which is actually 18mm. You want to put some Loctite on the thread of your power steering pump, just for added insurance, so it does not come off. Then go ahead and thread your nut on and tighten it up with the impact gun. Okay, now we're going to replace our water pump pulley. There's 4 10mm nuts holding it on. Go ahead and take it off. And when you're going to install it, the deep end goes towards the motor and the shallow end goes to the outside of the motor. You want to put a little bit of Loctite on your threads. This pulley kit comes with the supplied nuts as well, so you do not need to use your stock ones. They are 4 10mm nuts. Now we're going to place our pulley on our alternator. It's a 24mm nut. Again, you want to hold the pulley and shoot it with an air gun. Okay, now you need to remove your locking washer and then pull the pulley straight off. The pulley kit we're using comes with a blue anodized washer that you put inside the hole there, so it does not bottom out the pulley. And if you look on the back side of the pulley against the stock pulley, you'll see there's the nipple on the back that actually goes towards the alternator. You want to put your stock locking washer back on there. Put a little bit of Loctite on your threads. Install your stock 24mm nut back on, and then tighten it down. Okay, our transmission came with the end of the drive shaft cut off, so we have that installed into the back of the transmission. We have a crowbar going through the yoke of it, going onto the bottom of the engine lift, so it will hold it. So we didn't have to remove our transmission to hold it to install the crank pulley, or remove the crank pulley, either way. Okay, we're going to install our unorthodox crank pulley. Make sure you line the notch up on the crank pulley with the keyway on the crank shaft. It's not going to go back all the way, so you're going to have to line it up, and you're going to have to take a hammer or whatnot and knock it back a little bit so you can get your bolt started in. And go ahead and snug the bolt down. It's a 27mm bolt. We have the crowbar on the back where the drive shaft will be. Hold it so it does not spin. We have the transmission in gear. We're going to torque this down to 100 foot-pounds. And it's installed. Okay, the alternator, the crank, and the water pump pulleys all run off the same belt. It is the wider belt of the three. This one's going to be a little tight to put on because it's going through 3 different pulleys. Okay, it is installed. You want to take the 12mm bolt on the left side of the alternator. Go ahead and tighten that up. That's going to tighten the tension of the belt. You'll know the belt is tightened up enough because you can grab it with your finger and move it up and down to where it's not wiggling anymore. You don't want to get it too tight, but you don't want to leave it too loose. If you leave it too loose, it'll start squeaking. Alright, after the belt is tightened up, you want to take the 12mm nut on the front top side of the alternator, tighten it up. It actually holds the alternator in place for the tensioner, so the tensioner will not move anymore. And then on the bottom back side of the alternator, you have a 14mm bolt that keeps the alternator from spinning on the bracket. You just want to snug it up. If you look at it as a bolt, where he's pointing at, it goes all the way to the back of the alternator. That's where that nut is located at. Okay, we're going to install our AC belt now. We do not have our compressor on yet, so we're going to have to install that when we get it in the car, but since it goes on before the power steering pump belt, we're going to have to go ahead and put it on now. It's the longer of the two between the AC and the power steering. Just go ahead and put it on there. Then we'll go ahead and take the power steering belt and install it on. It's the shorter one. And we'll go ahead and tighten up the power steering pump. Okay, on the right hand side there is the tensioner. You need to tighten that up to tighten the belt up. It's 12mm. And then the nut down the front is 12mm as well. That's what tightens up the tensioner so it does not move anymore. And then there is a 14mm bolt through the pulley there. It actually tightens up the pump to the bracket. Okay, then go ahead and tighten up your nut to tighten up your tensioner. And go ahead and tighten up your bolt to hold your power steering pump to the bracket. Okay, this is the belt that we're using for the power steering. Okay, this is the belt we're using for the AC. Okay, the belt we're using for the alternator, crank, and water pump pulley is this one right here. Okay, down here under the car, looking from the driver's side of the car to the AC compressor, you can see the front bottom bolt bolts up, where the back one here does not. There's the AC compressor right there. There's the bracket where it bolts up. As you can see how far it is off. So this bolt here bolts up. Then we'll go up top. Okay, on the top here, on top of the AC compressor, as you can see the back bolt, it almost lines up, but it does not line up. So you can't use that one. But the front one here does. So basically you use the top front one and the bottom front one to bolt the AC compressor up. Okay, on the AC line there, you can see that that port there is right in the way of the turbo inlet pipe. I was told that we could actually bend that line down and to clear that, but that is, I would say, near impossible to do. So you're going to have to make a custom line for the AC line right there if you plan on keeping the AC. And in the process of us trying to bend ours, we broke the port off anyway, so it's no good. Okay, since we got to get a custom AC line made, we're going to remove this one. It's a 30mm bolt and a 32mm nut. You want to be extra careful with this and not bend or break the AC lines at all because they are very fragile. Before you remove this line, make sure you have your AC system professionally discharged. Okay, then going down the line, it hooks to the AC compressor here. Okay, it's a 12mm bolt holding the line onto the compressor there. We're going to remove that, and the line will come off. You can go and pull the whole line out of the car. Okay, we're going to cut the AC compressor, all the tie straps off of it, and he's going to hold it up. And we're going to mount it to the motor. Okay, down here under the car, it's the front bottom bolt. It's 14mm. You're only going to be able to hook up the front, bottom, and top bolts. The back two will not work. They will not line up. You want to snug the bottom one down and then go up top and install the top one. So you got a little bit of leeway to move it around to get it lined up. Okay, now we're up top. We're going to install the top bolt. Front top bolt. It's 14 millimeters well. Okay, we're going to go install our AC belt now. Just pull it over the compressor. Okay, the top bolt is 14 millimeter. It's your tensioner bolt. You want to tighten the belt up with that. Okay, after you get that tightened down, you want to tighten down the front 14 millimeter nut on the pulley. That's what actually tightens down your tensioner. It doesn't let it move anymore. Okay, on the AC belt, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it is twisted a little bit because the AC compressor is not sitting flush. So your belt will wear out a lot quicker than normal. So to summarize on the AC system, to get it to work properly, you need to modify the bracket so it will straighten up the belt. You have 2 bolts on the front, the top and the bottom will bolt up. The back 2 will not. So you can modify that too to get the back 2 to work, or you can just use the front 2. You need a custom line on the top here, one that runs from here to the compressor. Other than that, you should be good. It should work properly. We're not going to show you the custom line on this video because the owner of this car is not going to do it right now. Okay, now we're going to replace our fuel filter and lines. You want to reuse the rubber pieces on top, so just slide them off. And next, on the bottom, you want to remove the clamp. You want to loosen that clamp up and remove it. We're going to go ahead and cut all of our hoses off because we're going to replace them. I would highly recommend replacing these hoses. Then we're going to cut the hoses off on the bottom, and the fuel filter and the hoses will come off together. And just go ahead and pull the fuel filter and everything out. You also want to remove all your clamps off of there because we're going to reuse those. You can replace it with new ones if you like. Take your new hose. It's a 5/16 hose. Just measure out what you need from the bottom of the fuel filter to the hard line. Okay, after you have the hose installed, go ahead and put 2 clamps on the hose. Then install your fuel filter onto the hose. And after you get it installed, then put it onto the bracket. It will stretch it out a little bit, but that is okay. It will fit and will stay. Then go ahead and install your clamps and tighten them up. Okay, now we're going to install our new fuel line onto the fuel filter. We got ours cut at 27 inches, but we're going to cut it size when we get the motor in. Go ahead and install your clamp on there, and then install your stock rubber piece. Okay, now we're going to install our vacuum line. We cut ours at 23 inches. We'll cut it size when we get the motor in. Like before, you can install just a little bit of motor oil onto the hard line so the hose will install easier. Okay, now install your clamp and your stock rubber piece. Then install your line on the clamp there beside the fuel filter. Okay, we're going to do our fuel pump install. I definitely recommend doing this outside. First thing you want to do is pull up your carpet. Then pull the cardboard piece out. You want to roll your carpet forward so it will not come back on you. Now you have 4 10mm bolts holding the cover down. And next you have two Phillips head screws holding that plate down. Okay, you need to disconnect that harness. Just a push and pull harness. Go ahead and pull the cover up. Okay, our fuel pump had lots of dust on it, so we vacuumed it up and sprayed it off with the air hose. You have two hoses coming in there. One is just a clamp that you can squeeze and pull off. The next one is a Phillips head clamp. Go ahead and remove those. After you get the clamps back, push the hoses back to release them off the fuel tank. And watch out for fuel spillage. You're not going to have a lot if you did fuel pressure release and your gas cap is off, but you will get a little. Now you have 6 8mm bolts around to take off. We'll go ahead and remove those. Be real gentle with those. They're very small and they will break and strip very easily. And get ready for gas smell as well, because when you pull this off, you open up the hole to the gas tank. Okay, when you get the last one off, you're going to want to pull it up, but be warned, there is a rubber O-ring under there that can fall off and can fall into the gas tank, so be aware of that when you're pulling this up. And the fuel pump is hooked to the bottom of this, and it's going to be a little bit of a maneuvering to get it out, so just be patient with it and pull it off slowly. Just pull it straight up. There'll be some arms on the bottom of it. It's going to make it want to hit the sides and everything. The O-ring is actually on the gas tank. Okay, as you see, the fuel pump is coming out. And you got to get the sock out there, and then you have the float you got to get out. And it's out. Pull the whole unit out of the car. Okay, to show you what the O-ring looks like, that's it right there. The black rubber one that goes all the way around. Do not take it out if it did not come out, because it can swell up and then you have to get a new one, which I would recommend replacing it anyways because they're really cheap. Okay, we have the fuel pump outside the car now. We're going to cut the black and red wire. We're going to remove the top clamp on the rubber hose. You're going to grab the fuel pump, pull it off the bottom of the unit. You might have to push it up a little bit and then pull it out. Be real careful not to bend the float at all, the arm of the float, because that will make your gas gauge not work properly. Okay, now the bottom is out of the unit. We're going to pull down and remove the hose off the unit and leave all that connected to the fuel pump. So the stock fuel pump sock is all out. Okay, you need to take the rubber piece on the bottom of the unit, take it out, because your Walbro fuel pump comes with a smaller one, because it's a lot smaller than the stock unit, as you can see. Okay, now we're going to install the fuel pump to see where we need to cut the rubber hose. Okay, install the rubber grommet onto the new fuel pump. You can see it has slots in it, so it'll fit on there. And the slot on the side there goes where the sock will go, so you have access for your sock, for the hole for your sock. And you want to go ahead and install that onto the pump, the unit itself. You want to go on one way. Then you can see where you need to cut your rubber hose at. Then you want to pull it back off, cut the hose to size. Okay, now you want to go ahead and just install your clamp onto the hose of the fuel pump. Tighten it down where the hose goes to the fuel pump. Okay, we're going to install the sock onto the fuel pump now. You just press it down on there, and it comes with a little small washer that smashes down onto the nipple in the middle there, and that's what actually holds the sock on. Okay, we're going to push that little washer down with a 4mm socket. If you can't do it by hand, you might need to tap it with a small hammer or just a ratchet or whatnot. Make sure it goes all the way down. Okay, as you can see, the washer is all the way down. That's what it should look like when it's installed. Okay, we're going to install the second clamp onto the rubber hose. Now we're going to install the rubber boot on the bottom of the pump. Okay, now go ahead and install the rubber line onto the unit. You want to smash it on there while you're also watching the bottom of the pump, because you want to have enough on the bottom of the pump so the pump will stay in the bottom of the unit. But you do not want to bend the unit either. And also make sure you have the sock pointing in the right direction. Make sure you got the bottom in correctly. Keep twisting the pump until you get in properly. The sock is pointing out towards the cut of the bottom of the unit. Okay, go ahead and install your clamp on, tighten it down. Make sure your clamps are good and tight, because you're not going to be able to check them later, because they will be in the fuel tank. Okay, now we're going to do the wiring. We're going to splice both wires, hooks the red to the red, the black to the black. These are 14 gauge wires. You want to use the butt splice connectors that are supplied with the unit. Crimp them down. Okay, we got the clamps tight, we got the wiring done, we got the sock on, everything's installed. We're going to take it back to the trunk, put it back into the gas tank. Okay, now we're going to install a fuel pump back into the gas tank. You want to install your float first. And be real careful not to hit that O-ring and knock it out. And you also want to make sure your fuel pump is turned the right way. Remember, your harness was on the left side, the driver's side. And your hose barbs are pointing towards the front of the car. You want to line the bolt holes up and go ahead and bolt them down. Be real careful bolting these down. They can strip and break easily. So just hand tighten them. They don't need to be torqued or anything. Do it in a crisscross pattern because you want the O-ring to seal properly. Okay, we're going to install the hoses now. I would install the fuel line first, which is the one on the passenger side. Get it started on there and use some needle nose pliers to kind of work it on there. Be real careful not to damage or cut the hose in any way. The best way is just grab it and wiggle it back and forth while you're pulling it forward. It's about really the only way you can do it. Okay, now go ahead and install a clamp on that line. Remember, that's the line that has the Phillips head clamp. Okay, now we're going to install the driver's side hose. I'm going to install a clamp on that side. This is a squeeze clamp. Put your cover back on. Okay, now you want to go ahead and connect your harness. Go ahead and bolt your 4 10mm bolts down to hold the plate down. You don't have to torque these either, just snug them down. And do it in a crisscross pattern so the seal will seal properly on it. Okay, lay your harness down and put your other plate on and bolt it down with the Phillips head screws. Go ahead and install your metal plate on. Has the arrow pointing towards the front. Screw it down with the Phillips head screws. And your fuel pump install is done. Okay, we're going to remove our windshield wiper washer tank. You have 2 wiring connections to disconnect. Right below those you have 2 rubber lines to disconnect. On top you have a 10mm bolt to remove. To the right side you have a 10mm bolt to remove. And then on the bottom side of the tank there is another harness to remove. Now here on the front you have your last 10mm bolt removed that removes the bracket from the car, and the whole tank will come off. You could actually move this tank over to the left if you wanted to, but we're just going to remove ours completely. If you want to keep your wiper tank, you can put it in there and move everything over just a little bit to the left. You'll actually have to drill the hole for the neck out too. You have to cut it out a little more so you can move it over to the left. But the bracket here on the left hand side, you'll bend it over just a little bit, and then the bracket on the bottom, you probably won't use it anymore neither because it will be too far over to hit the wall. But you can get it to work. But we're not going to use ours, we're just going to leave it out. Okay, when you're going to cut your hole through your battery tray for your cold pipe, you kind of need to put it in here in eye because you're not going to be able to put it all the way forward like it's going to sit. So you basically get your measurements from side to side, and then you can turn it this way to get from front to back. It's not going to be dead on, but it's going to be really, really close. Plus we're using a 4-inch hole saw because it's going to make the hole bigger, so we're actually going to have a little more room on each side, which is good. So when the intercooler goes to move a little bit, it's not going to bang on the sheet metal. But that's about where we're going to put ours. And then if you don't hit it dead on, you could go around and cut it out just a little bit more if you need to. It's not that big a deal. Just kind of bend it back and forth. Okay, on our cold pipe, we had to notch it out with a Sawzall, but to get our measurements to help you guys, you would want to cut this one at 5.5 inches from the wall there, from the lip of the battery tray, and then 2 inches on this side. So you got 2 inches on that side, 5.5 inches on the other side, which is where your hole will be from side to side. Alright, from front to back, I would go with 2.5 inches on the front, and then on the back I would go 6.5 inches. So that'll be from the edge of your hole from front to back on both sides. Because this intercooler piping right here, as you've seen before, it's a whole piece that goes all the way down to the next piece that hooks through the intercooler, which is an L, which doesn't give you much leeway to measure it out for your hole, which is why we ended up having to cut so much out. But if you use this intercooler with this intercooler piping, and you cut the hole the size that we just showed you, you should be good. So I would definitely recommend using a Sawzall, or you could use the hole saw. The hole saw wanted to dull out on us though, so I would recommend the Sawzall. And also be aware on the side here, you might have to cut into the sidewall there, because our intercooler was actually bumping up on that, so we had to cut it back just a little bit. Or you could just remove the battery tray altogether, but you would still have to cut into that sidewall. Reason why we're keeping the battery tray is because our AC dryer there bolts to it, and since we're going to try and keep our AC, we're going to keep the battery tray there just to keep that hooked up. Okay, on this side, this is where our stock hole still is. We did not cut this right here, so I would go 3.5 inches over this way to cut for, and then coming from the front right here to the back, which is still going off the stock hole, I would go probably about 4 inches, and you should be good. But like I say, every setup is just a little bit different, so it might be off just a little bit. Okay, to hook the engine up to the lift, you can use these two bolt locations right here on top and bottom there. And the bolts you need to use are M8 1.25 thread pitch, whatever size you need. Plus use about 2 or 3 thick washers to hold them on there. Okay, these two locations on the back here on the passenger side are the ones we're going to use. They're M8 1.25 thread pitch as well. So we're going to go ahead and hook the chain up to that side. Okay, that's what it looks like when it's done. The two locations on the intake manifold there, a lot of people hook their engine lift to those. I recommend not doing that because you could break your intake manifold gasket, and you could also even crack your intake manifold, because that's just putting all the strain of the motor on the intake manifold. I recommend putting them on the block right there like we just did. Okay, when you're bringing your motor into the engine bay, you want to leave your transmission crossmember loose. You want to leave your motor mounts loose. We have the ones that are adjustable, so we just loosen the adjusters on them. If you have the stock ones, you'll probably want to loosen up the bolt that holds it to the bracket. On the back of the motor, you want to watch out for your turbo water line, plus your heater hose line, plus your coil pack harness. They're all going to want to hit the firewall. Okay, you want to watch your AC line. We have ours removed right now, but it would normally go all the way to the AC compressor. But you also want to watch out for your AC compressor. Your motor mount's going to want to hit that. Your turbo elbows are going to want to hit the steering shaft, so you want to watch out for that. Okay, your transmission's going to want to hit your power steering lines down there. You have to watch out for those. The transmission crossmember is going to want to hit your clutch line down there, all the hard line stuff down there. You have to watch out for all those. Okay, we're going to bring the motor in the engine bay now. I'm going to lower it down and pull it to the engine bay in increments, watching everything as it comes down. First thing you're going to want to do is get the transmission lined up with the transmission tunnel. So the top of the transmission will hit the top of the transmission tunnel. But you're only going to get so far, then you're going to have to push the motor back because it's going to want to hit the radiator support. You want to keep the motor and transmission in the center as much as possible. When you get it back far enough where the transmission's hitting the firewall, you want to lower it down just a little bit more. You're in the tunnel?
Yep.
Okay. Once you're in the tunnel, you want to keep pressing back with the engine lift. And go ahead and lower it down a little bit. The transmission is going to follow the tunnel down now, so the motor will go back with it. You just want to watch your oil pan and the radiator support. Make sure they don't hit. Watch all your lines and everything on the back of the motor to the firewall. Get everything lined up, ready to go. Bring the oil pan all the way down to the top of the radiator support. Push back. The transmission has got a bump on top of it. It's going to want to grab onto the tunnel and get stuck sometimes, so be aware of that. At this point now, you want to watch the back. With everything to the firewall, you want to watch the cross member to the clutch line on the bottom. You want to keep the motor mount lined up so it's going to miss the AC compressor, as well as the turbo elbow to the steering shaft. Come down slowly. You might want to move the AC compressor just a little bit. It's in your way. Okay, pull it your way a little bit. Okay. After you get everything out of the way of everything, you want to make sure the motor is lined up straight, transmission's lined up straight at the tunnel. Take a jack on the transmission, jack the transmission up to level the motor up. You want to jack the transmission where the cross member almost touches the car but does not touch the car, and level the transmission out.
Okay, cut.
Okay, good. What happened?
I'm just trying to pull it to the left a little, and it pulled up from under it.
Our jack fell off our transmission, but it's okay. Basically what he's doing, he's pulling the transmission over to line it up, and it fell off the jack, which is okay because it's not hurting anything because nothing's touching anything. Just want to watch out and be careful for things like that. Once you get it level, you want to bring the motor down just a little bit so you get the motor mounts almost lined up with the cross member. Is the transmission all the way to the car?
Yeah.
Alright. Okay, we're going to lower the motor down into the car now. Just go real slow, got it in. You want to try to get both motor mounts as close as they can, but you definitely want to get one in first, and then we'll work on the other one.
I'm in.
Okay. Okay, now we're going to bring the motor down and show you the driver's side motor mount going in. Again, you want to come down slowly. This is what helps with your motor mount being loose. Okay, it's in all the way. Okay, now that the motor mounts are lined up, I'm going to lower the motor down all the way, and then he's going to wiggle the motor just a little bit to make sure it's sitting down all the way. Okay, as you can see on the back of the motor to the firewall, you can see how much clearance you actually have for the heater hoses and everything. You have plenty of room. Okay, we're going to install our transmission cross member to the car. With the aftermarket motor mounts and transmission mount, our cross member is a little forward, so we're going to put a screwdriver up in the middle hole and pull it back to install our bolts. Our motor mounts are still loose, so you just want to stick the screwdriver in there, pull the cross member back to line up the bolt holes, and install your bolt. Go ahead and snug it down. Don't tighten it down all the way, just get it a little bit snug all the way up so it don't want to move on you. And then we'll go to the other side and get another bolt in. Two of our bolt holes are stripped out. We're going to have to tap them out, so right now we're only going to install two. So we can go ahead and install our drive shaft and everything. The other side's going to be a little harder to do, but it's definitely doable. Ours is going to be a little harder because our bolts are stripped out on that side. But we just want to get one in there so we can get our drive shaft installed, and then we'll come back later and tap out the threads. We're using new bolts. The sizes of these bolts are M10 1.25 thread pitch. We're using 30 millimeters long. I would recommend using locking washers on them, and probably even a little bit of Loctite on your threads. The 12 millimeter nuts from the transmission crossmember to the transmission mount are 16 to 21 foot-pounds. The 4 17 millimeter nuts from the crossmember to the chassis are 32 to 41 foot-pounds. Okay, we're using the one-piece drive shaft. So if you were using the stock one, you'd have to install your center bearing. It is the reverse order as removal when we removed it earlier from the KA. But now we're going to install this one. You want to put the drive shaft into the back of the transmission. Make sure the teeth are lined up with the shaft on the transmission. It should slide in. You want to bend it down a little bit because the back of it is going to want to hit the sway bar. As you can see, it's just one piece. It's not bendable, but the yoke on the end is. So you want to insert it into the transmission, bring it up to the differential, line it up with the holes. Okay, we're going to install the drive shaft onto the differential. You want to put your bolt in through the drive shaft into the differential. It has a notch on it so the bolt will not turn when it's installed. Then on the other side you want to put your locking washer on and then a nut. You can leave your e-brake off and leave the transmission in neutral so you can spin the drive shaft over. Okay, after you have all the nuts snug down, the factory torque specs on it is 29 to 33 foot-pounds. Okay, we're going to install the slave cylinder now. We did not even touch ours. We just basically unbolt it from the KA transmission. Now we're going to bolt it to the SR transmission. So we will not need to bleed it at all. We still have our stock dampener and everything on here. Two 14 millimeter bolts. Okay, we're going to install the motor mount nuts now. We're on the passenger side. The torque on this is 51 to 58 foot-pounds. Okay, we're going to bring the downpipe in and install it onto the turbo elbow. The bolts to use on that is M10 1.25, just like the rest of them. The turbo elbow is threaded. There's no nut, so the bolts will thread into the turbo elbow. You want to use the gasket in between them. You want to go ahead and put one bolt through the downpipe and put the gasket on it too. Go ahead and get it started threaded in onto the turbo elbow. And after you get started, you want to flip your gasket back over if it fell out. Start another bolt in. There are 3 bolts altogether, 17 millimeter. We're using all new ones. Again, they're M10 1.25 thread pitch. We're using 30 millimeters long. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to tighten them down by hand, and then we're going to wait till we get the car running, because usually when you get an exhaust leak you can hear it and feel it when you get under the car while it's running. We're going to tighten up like that. If you want to start out with a torque spec, I would start out with at least 30 to 32 foot-pounds and then see if it's leaking after the car is running. Okay, we're going to bring the exhaust in now and hang it up on the hangers first. You kind of want to lay the exhaust on your body and pick the front of it up with your feet so you can level it out so you can get the hangers up to the rubber. Okay, now we're doing the next one down. This will be the third one. It's right here at the subframe. Okay, now coming in from the driver's side of the car, you have another one here. Okay, we're using a test pipe on this car. Normally your stock cat would be there, but there's no difference there. Okay, next you want to install your cat to the downpipe. You want to go and put your gasket in between there. Put a bolt through there and then thread a nut on. As you can see, ours is not lining up very well, but that is a very common thing. So you want to just install it and tighten it up. and then check it when you start the car for exhaust leaks. Your bolts might be different, but we're using M10 1.25, 40 millimeters long. We're using locking washers, and they're 17 millimeter bolts and nuts. Now you want to do the other side the exact same way. You definitely want to tighten up the side that has the biggest crack on it. Okay, on the power steering reservoir to the power steering pump, the main hose there on top will work just fine, no modifications. But the bottom hose, you're going to have to cut it to size. As you can see the hard line there, you're going to have to bring it up, cut it about right here, and then it will bolt up just fine. Okay, we cut off 4 3/4 inch of that hose, and as you see, we'll install on there. Fits really good. Okay, now we're going to install the power steering lines. We're going to do the top one first. It's a 24 millimeter bolt. Has 2 crush washers on it. One crush washer goes on the pump, one crush washer goes on the bolt. Then you have the guide on the line, which goes into the notch on the power steering pump, so you cannot install it wrong. 24 millimeter bolt, threaded on. Again, you have a crush washer on each side of the line. Okay, we're going to install the bottom hose now. Has an 8 millimeter clamp on both sides. Okay, we're getting ready to make some new grounds for the motor to the chassis. We're using 4-gauge wire. And as you can see, the stock ground is right there. So you want to take that and cut your new wire to the length of that. You can probably make it just a little longer, it'll be fine. Okay, now you want to splice the wire and get some raw wire hanging out. Just want to cut enough out to go inside the eyelet. Twist that wire up and then place it inside the eyelet. And take your crimping tool and crimp the eyelet down onto the wire. Okay, after you have it crimped down, we're going to go ahead and solder our connection too. Okay, now we're going to solder our connection. Take your torch and stick it on the eyelet. Just heat the eyelet up a little bit. And then take your solder and stick it on the end of the eyelet so it can go down inside the eyelet. Okay, now you want to take some electrical tape and wrap up your connections. You want to do this on both sides. Okay, now we're going to remove the bolt on the back of the motor where the ground goes. It's a 12 millimeter bolt. Now we're going to install the ground wire and bolt it down. The reason we're using these rather than the stock ones, these get better ground than the stock ones. It's highly recommended to do this. Okay, we're going to remove the factory ground wire on the firewall there. That's the one that goes to the back of the motor that we made. It's a 10 millimeter bolt. Go ahead and remove that. Okay, this is what ours looks like complete. When you remove your factory wire, you want to take a wire brush or some sandpaper and sand the paint off of the firewall just to get a better ground connection. Okay, now we're going to make another ground from the intake manifold to the strut tower, and then the strut tower right there. You want to go ahead and scratch some of the paint off the strut tower there to get good ground on that. Okay, after you get that off, go ahead and make the wire. We're going to do a 12-inch wire. Okay, we're going to go ahead and install on the intake manifold now. It's a 12 millimeter bolt. We'll install it on the strut tower later. We're going to install our cool overflow tank. Okay, we're going to install our fuel lines our motor was dropped over from the importer, so our fuel lines are bent up. That's the one off fuel pressure regulator on the front. It's bent up, and then the one to the back is coming from the fuel line. We're going to have to remove the hard line from that, and we're going to run our line straight to the back hard line on the back of the motor there. So we're going to remove that hard line there. It has 3 10mm bolts on it that we're going to remove. Get that one, and that one. And you have a Phillips head clamp. You have actually 2 Phillips head clamps. We're going to remove the back one and remove the rubber line with it, with the hard line. Grab the hard line, pull it up, and then pull the rubber line off the hard line in the back. Might want to take some needle nose pliers and turn the rubber line on the back just to break it loose. After you get that out, you want to take all the 10mm bolts and bolt them back up, bolt the bracket back up on the intake manifold. Okay, now we're going to take the line on top of the fuel filter and run it to the hard line where we just removed everything from. The reason we're having to do this is because ours was bent. Normally you would just take yours to the hard line that we removed. Okay, now the fuel line beside the fuel filter is going to run over and hook onto the fuel pressure regulator. It's actually going to install in that bracket you put back on there too. Just slides down on there. Normally your fuel line coming off the fuel pressure regulator would be pointing down, but ours is bent, so for right now we're just going to use it and leave it that way. Because if we tried to bend it back down, it would probably break. Have to upgrade that later. Okay, we're going to remove the back seat now. There's a little tab on each side of the front. You just want to grab it and pull it forward, and then pick up on the seat. Another one on the other side. Pull the seat belts through the holes, and the seat will come out. Okay, now we're going to pull the back seat down. It's got little hooks on it. Just pull up on them and then pull the seat back. And it comes down. Okay, we're going to pull the scuff plate off here on the door jamb. It's got little hold downs. Take a flathead screwdriver, stick it underneath there, and unscrew it with a Phillips head while you're prying up on it with a flathead.
Those are already done, so I'll start right here.
Pull the whole thing out. Now we're going to pull the carpet up. You got a couple plastic pieces that go over the door jamb there. Just pull up on them. You got another rubber piece on the back side there. You just pull that up. It's a weather strip. Pull the carpet over. I'm going to pull it over all the way to where the back seat was, so you can have access. As you can see, someone's already run speaker wire through here. We're going to run our battery wire through here, our positive battery wire. Okay, we're going to remove the stock negative battery cable because we're not going to use it anymore. There's a 10mm bolt on the battery tray. Go ahead and remove that, and the cable will come off. Okay, now we're going to take the cable, we're going to run all the way to the trunk for the battery. We're going to run it through this hole right here. It'll come out in the fender well. Okay, now we're here under the passenger side fender well. You have the grommet here where the wiring's going in. We're going to cut a slot in it so we can run our wire through that. Rather than slicing it all the way through, we're just going to cut a slice so we can run it through there. Just so, because if you cut a slice all the way through, you'd probably be able to let water get in there from the tire. You want to run your wire through that hole. Okay, down here under the dash, you can see where our battery wire's coming in. That grommet right there with that wiring connection. And it's going to come in. And run it down out of here. And behind the carpet here, you have a hole right here. We're going to feed it through this hole right here and run it down this whole channel. Okay, you want to pull the carpet back, insert it into that front hole there, and feed it all the way down through. You have more holes going down through so you can make sure it's going all the way down. Okay, what we're doing is we're using a screwdriver to keep it on the side there, because it can go all the way over here and grab on things wanting to bunch it up. So to keep it straight, you can use screwdrivers coming down the side holes there. Okay, we came out this hole right here beside the seat. It can't go no further than this right here because there's something in there stopping it. There's a wall or whatnot. So it needs to come out that hole there, go underneath the seat belt over here on this side, and then come out the back. I'm going to feed it through that way now. Okay, now we're going to feed it under the seat and behind the seat. As you can see all these other speaker wires and everything. And it's going to come out the back here at the strut tower. Okay, now we're running the wire up through the back of this carpet here. We're running it through, as you can see there's a hole in there. We're going to come through that hole. After you got through the hole, you want to run back through the front side of the strut tower here, and it's going to run all the way through the carpet on the inside and come out this back hole right here. Just grab it on the bottom, pull it out. You can feed it all up underneath there. You can remove all the screws on the bottom of the carpet here. If your car had any, this car did not have any. Okay, now we're going to bring our distribution box in. We have 4 gauge on one side, 2 8 gauges on the other side. We're going to bring it in, cut our 4 gauge wire coming back from the battery. We went ahead and installed our coolant tank. We just have it sitting there. It's not bolted down or anything. Just hold it there so we can get our wiring lined up and everything. We're just going to sit that distribution box on top of that wiring harness there. We're not going to bolt it down or anything. The wires are so thick they'll hold it there anyways. It'll be just fine. Okay, now we're going to cut the insulation off. And now we're going to install the 4 gauge wire into the distribution block. Okay, we're going to cut the stock positive wire off, and we're going to use that because it already has the starter and alternator and all the power connections hooked to it, so we don't have to rerun none of that. We'll go ahead and cut the insulation off for that. And we'll go ahead and install it into the distribution block. Okay, next we're going to have to run these to the distribution block as well. They come from the fuse box, and they used to plug into the back of the positive battery cable, little red block right there. So we're going to cut those and open the wire up on those and put them in the distribution block as well. There's 3 wires all together. Now we're going to tie all 3 of those wires together and then install them onto the distribution block. Okay, now we're going to put the top on it, just a little plastic covering. Just pops on each side. Okay, now we're going to install our fuses. We're using two 80 amp fuses. Okay, we're going to screw down the battery box. We're going to go ahead and start a pilot hole for them, just because it's a tight spot. You want to be extra careful when you're doing this. You do not want to drill through the gas tank below. So be extra careful with that. Just go real slow. The most important thing you want to do is figure out how much distance you have from the bottom of the sheet metal to the top of the gas tank. And then measure how thick your battery box is on the bottom, and that's how you figure out what length screw you need. Okay, now we're going to drop the battery down into the box. I would totally recommend a dry cell battery, but this owner is using this one for now. Okay, we're going to install the ends on the battery cable now. We're going to cut it size. Okay, now that one's finished. Of course, we're not going to hook up to the battery right yet. We're just getting it ready to go. Now we're going to do the negative cable. Okay, now we're going to install the negative cable onto the battery just to get our size of the cable right. You can snug it down if you want to. Just get it on the post so you'll know where it's going to be. You can bring the battery cable. We're actually going to ground ours to where the spare tire bolts down.
So I give it a little bit extra just
a touch. Okay, now we're going to crimp the eyelet on the end of the wire. Okay, now you want to take some electrical tape and tape up your eyelet to the wire. And however you want to do it, you need to scrape the paint off the surface so you can get a good ground. That's good enough.
Think?
Yeah. That hole is a M8 1.25 thread pitch. Use a washer on that as well. Again, it's an M8 1.25 thread pitch. Okay, now we're going to install our 100 amp fuse on our positive wire. It needs to be a foot away from the positive battery post. Okay, we've measured out a foot and we're going to cut the wire. We're using the 100 amp inline fuse. Let's go ahead and splice off the insulation as much as you need. And your inline fuse is installed. Okay, now we're going to put the car back together. Make sure your carpet's all tucked in everywhere. Not going to be in the way of anything. You come down the side, slide them over. Now you can bring your scuff plate in. Put all your hold downs in, and then we'll put the screws in on them. You can go ahead and put your screw in, the hold downs. Yeah, press it down. Okay, we're going to bring the back seat in now. It's the reverse of removable. You gotta get those little hoops to go up underneath the back of the seat. Okay, first you gotta get the seat belt to come through the holes. You want to get the little hoops to go up underneath the back seat. And let's get the latches to latch down. How's it? Your back seat's installed. Okay, for the transmission you need 2.7 quarts of gear oil. I suggest using the Redline MT90. It works really well. It's a little expensive, but it's really good. It's also SAE 75W90 API GL4 gear oil. Do not use GL5, it will mess up your synchros. So basically what you can do is go ahead and pour in 2 full quarts of that into the transmission, and then the 0.7 you can either pour half of it plus a little bit more out of the bottle, or you can use a measuring cup, either way. Okay, basically what we did is we used this container here to measure out our 0.7. Then we're going to take it and pour it into the transmission. You can use the phone to make things cleaner. All you got to do is just pour it down into the transmission there. It doesn't have to go down in this hole or anything, it just has to go in this vicinity. It's all going to pour down into the gearbox. We've already poured 2 quarts in there. Then we're going to pour this 0.7 in there. And that'll be 2.7 quarts. And after you get all this in there, you can go ahead and install your shifter. Okay, before you go to install your shifter, make sure your spring's installed and your check ball. We're going to go ahead and take them out just to show you what they are. You have the spring, and you have a check ball down in there. You need to take a magnetic one and get it out. You would not have to take this out, we're just taking it out to make sure that you know what is what. And now you can go ahead and pour your check ball out. You might have to bend your magnetic wand a little bit to get it out. That's what your check ball looks like. And we're going to install it back in. Be careful not to drop it into the transmission. That would be very bad. It goes in that hole right there. Then your spring's going to go in there. Okay, next you want to take some RTV and RTV gasket on the bottom of your shifter. If you do not have the paper gasket, you're going to go inside all the bolt holes, just like. Okay, now we're going to install our shifter. You want to keep it up as high as you can so the RTV don't hit the spring or anything, so you can get it overhead and then smash it down. You want to get it in there, take a bolt, put it in the back, line it up, and go ahead and start to thread it in a little bit, and then you can smash the shifter plate down to the transmission. So you don't mess your RTV gasket up. The longer bolts go on the back. There's 2 longer bolts, they go on the back. And the other 4 bolts are the same size. They're 12mm bolts, there's 6 in all. You're going to do 4 right here, and the 2 in the front you're going to get from under the car. There is a fill hole on the side of the transmission. You can install your transmission fluid that way if you like. Our fill hole is stuck closed, so we can't get it open, so we had to do it this way. Plus I like doing it this way anyways. So you can reseal the seal on the plate. And plus we're going to swap out this shifter anyways with a new one, a short shifter. If you want to torque these, you can torque them to 12 to 14 foot-pounds. Of course, the 2 in the front you're not going to be able to torque. So I just like to get them pretty snug where you feel comfortable with. By now you should have a feel for 12 to 14 foot-pounds with a regular socket rather than a torque wrench. Now we'll go underneath the car and get the 2 front bolts when he gets his bolt done. The 2 12mm bolts on the front, I'm not going to be able to show you those because he's going to be under the car and there's no way I could video that because he'll be up in the tunnel. But basically you just need to drop your crossmember down just a little bit so you can get the bolt installed, and then you thread it in by hand and then take a 12mm ratcheting wrench, and I would turn it the opposite way and go ahead and tighten it down like that. That's really the best method because you're not going to be able to get a ratchet on there. So a ratcheting wrench will be the best method on that. Okay, now we're going to remove the stock shifter. You need to pull the rubber boot up. Ours is torn, so we're just going to go ahead and take it completely off. Okay, next you have a snap ring inside there, so you need some snap ring pliers. It basically sticks in the holes, squeeze it together, and it pulls it together, and then you pull it up. Okay, those two holes right there, that's where the snap ring pliers go in, and it pulls those two together so you can pull the ring out. Okay, after the snap ring is removed, just go ahead and pull the shifter assembly up. Just pull up on the whole thing, it'll come straight up. Okay, on the new shifter here, we're using the Fidanza shifter. It's the short shifter. You can see the notches on the ball there go in the little pins right there on the transmission. Down in the hole there is your striking arm hole. A little piece of plastic on the end here goes down in there, and the piece of plastic here goes around the circle hole right there. Make sure the angle of it is pointing back instead of forward. And we'll get it installed in the hole. Just push it down in there, and take the plastic, push it down in there. Okay, next you want to put your other piece of metal down. You do not need a snap ring anymore, you just need to put this on top. And then your other piece comes down on top of that, where it has little wings on the bottom of it. That actually, those little wings, they grab onto the shifter. Like right here, they kind of come off the shifter just a little bit. There is a notch around the outside of the shifter. They're going to grab onto that, and that's what locks it on. And then you have the Allen bolts to tighten it down with. The Fidanza short shifter uses a 3/16 Allen bolt. Okay, you need to remove one of the Allen bolts on each side so it'll swing out. And on the bottom, on the other Allen bolt, you need to thread it in probably one turn so it'll be down far enough so it'll grab the lip on the shifter there. We'll go ahead and install it on there now. You have to press down on it so the plastic piece on the bottom of the shifter there will go down. Take a little bit of finessing to do it, a little bit of maneuvering, but you will be able to do it. And after you get it in there, you want to install both Allen bolts on the sides. Make sure you get both sides, because if you start tightening one side up and the other side's not in, it will not go in. Okay, basically what we did to get ours started was you're going to pull up on the wing right here and press down on the plate on each bolt. Get one started just a little bit, and then go to the other side and get the other one started just a little bit, and then go ahead and tighten them all down in crisscross patterns a little bit at a time so it'll go down flush. And tighten them all down to where you feel comfortable with it not come loose, and your short shifter will be installed. Noticing now that we got it installed, this is the only way you'd be able to do it. You would not be able to do it outside the car and then install the plate with the new shifter on it, because as you can see, you would not be able to get to the 12mm bolts around it. So you'd have to install the plate first and then install this inside the car, just like we just did it. Okay, after we've installed this Fidanza short shifter, we went to shift gears on it, and it shifts horribly. After you get it tightened down enough on the sides there, it's too tight, it presses down on the ball too much, and it's really hard to shift. So you got to loosen it up enough where it will shift properly. It's still a little too tight, and plus your Allen bolts are going to come out. They will vibrate out. So I do not recommend using this short shifter. It gets a very bad review for me. It's a very bad design. I would go with the B&M or the B&M knockoff. Okay, we're going to cut our bracket. You need 3 holes. Okay, when you're going to install your intercooler brackets on the bottom, if you use the other intercooler, it comes with L brackets, but we're going to go ahead and make our own, because our intercooler kit did not come with any. This tab here on the bottom of the radiator support has a 10mm bolt in it. We're actually going to bolt up to that. So we're going to go ahead and remove that and install it behind there. Okay, we're going to install it behind the bracket now. Go ahead and tighten your bolt back down. Okay, since the bracket on the intercooler wants to hit the side wall of the radiator support there, we're going to bend it back just a little bit. You really don't need to do this on one side. Okay, we're going to go ahead and bend the bracket up just a little bit, and then we're going to install our intercooler just to get it lined up. You want to go ahead and get it started, bend it up though. And then we'll bring the intercooler in and line it up properly. Okay, that's good enough right there. And now we're going to bring our intercooler in. Okay, the top tab on the intercooler bolts to the hood latch right there. You need to remove that 12mm bolt there. it's not going to be long enough to go through it, so you need to get another M8 1.25 thread pitch bolt, whatever length you need. We're using a 40mm bolt. You could actually use a longer bolt off the AIV unit that you took off. Next, you're going to need a rubber washer, one with a cutout on the side, so it'll go over the lips there on the latch. If you use the other gritty intercooler kits, they will come with all this stuff, but the one we have does not. So we'll go ahead and bolt that up now. Okay, coming in from the top of the intercooler, we'll come down and look at the bracket. That's the bracket right there from the intercooler, and then the bracket on the bottom is the one we just made. As you can see, the holes are lining up. All we got to do is take a bolt and nut and thread them on, and they will line up. The one on the other side is the exact same way. You just want to check and make sure your bends are all right and everything, and your bolts are going to line up, and then you get and bolt them down. Okay, this is the bolt and nut we're using to mount the brackets together. Just got them at the hardware store. It doesn't really matter what size you use as long as it fits in the hole. And use 2 washers on each end. We're using a locking nut. Okay, now we're going to install our cold pipe. Go ahead and install 2 clamps on your coupler. And install in there. Put it through the hole, through the battery tray. Install the clamp onto the throttle body. The throttle body has a stop on it. You want to go all the way down to the bottom of that. Get the coupler to touch that stopper. We won't tighten no clamps yet, we're just putting everything on. Okay, down here on the intercooler, we want to use the small L piece to join them together. You want to put 2 clamps on each coupler. Go ahead and install it. Just make sure you have about a 1/4 inch in between each pipe in the middle of the coupler there. Make sure you have enough coupler on the pipe to install a clamp and tighten it down. We're going to go ahead and straighten it up. Okay, now we're going to install our hot pipe on. Make sure you got your clamps already on the pipe and everything. The turbo outlet pipe, it has a stopper on it as well. You want to take the coupler all the way down to the stopper, just like the throttle body. And this one right here will go down to the pipe going to the intercooler. We'll go ahead and bring that up from the bottom. Looks like this right here. You want to have all your clamps on it as well. We're going to get installed on that pipe and then come here to the intercooler and install it onto the intercooler. You can position everything a little bit later. Just want to get everything going right now. After you get everything on, you're going to pull your pipes out to get a 1/4 inch in between the pipes inside the couplers. This pipe right here needs to be going almost level with the motor. Just like that right there. You'll be pointing straight with the motor. Okay, when you're going to upgraded T-bolt clamps, which I highly recommend doing, you need to size your couplers. This one in particular is 2.5 inches on both sides, so you would need 2 2.5 inch clamps, T-bolt clamps for this. Okay, using the Grady Type M intercooler and piping kit, from the turbo to the hot pipe you would need 2 inch to 2 inch coupler and T-bolt clamps. Then coming down from the hot pipe to the extension pipe, you would need 2 inch to 2.5 inch, which is basically a reducer coupler. It's 2.5 inch on the bottom and 2 inch on top. So you would need a 2 inch clamp and a 2.5 inch clamp. Okay, down here at the intercooler, the extension pipe to the intercooler is a 2.5 inch to a 3 inch. So you would need a 2.5 inch clamp and a 3 inch clamp. Over here on the cold pipe side, the extension pipe you would need 3 inch to 3 inch to the intercooler. And from the extension pipe to the cold pipe, you would need a 3 inch to a 3 inch. And coming up top, the throttle body, you would need a 3 inch to a 3 inch. This whole side over here is 3 inch to 3 inch. So with all that being said, you would need 7 3 inch T-bolt clamps 3 2-inch T-bolt clamps and 2 2.5-inch T-bolt clamps. Okay, when you're going to install your clamps, you want to have about that much room between the clamp and the edge of the coupler. And as you can see, the bump on the piping is right there. You have about almost a 1/4 inch in between the pipes on the inside of the coupler. And same deal on this side over here with the clamp and the coupler. And the reason you want the 1/4 inch in between is so the piping between the two is not moving when the piping goes to flex a little bit. They will not be rubbing each other. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and tighten down our clamps. We've removed our nuts, but we're going to install them on and tighten them down. We're going to pressurize the system later, so it's not that critical to get them at a certain torque or anything. You probably want to use a deep well socket on these, because when you go to tighten them down, the threads will come out. I'll show you that when we get one tightened up. You want to hold your clamp in place so it'll be flush all the way around while you're tightening it up, because it will move on you. As you can see how much thread is actually hanging out after you get them tightened up. So you want to position your clamp whichever way you need or whichever way you want for looks wise. You definitely want to keep it out of the way. Like right here, if you put it up this way, it'd be in the way of the throttle arm here. The passenger side is the cold pipe side, the driver side is the hot pipe side. Just to clarify that.
Then this one.
That's probably it. When you're going to tighten up the hot pipe here, you want to hold the hot pipe and keep it in the hole that you cut down here through the sheet metal. Just hold it level and hold it up where you need it to be, because it will move on you. So you want to hold it in place while you tighten your clamp down. Okay, this one here is going to be a little more difficult because your coupler is in the hole right there, and your clamp's going to basically be in the hole, so you need to position it so it will work and will not bang up against it or get stuck on anything. So when you get your pipes right, get your about 1/4 inch in between two pipes, even enough for the clamp. Okay, the way we're going to do this pipe, we have it disconnected now. We're going to get it lined up with the other pipe up top, plus get it lined up with the intercooler at the same time. So we'll be sure that it is level and right on both ends before we go tighten it down. This is going to be the tricky one. Now you want to get your coupler right down here. Get your 1/4 inch in between the pipes. Get enough on the coupler to grab a clamp. After that's good, then we'll come up here to this one. What you're concerned with now is positioning the clamp so it will not bang on the sheet metal anywhere. Which actually, now that we got it lined up and everything, I think we're going to be good. It's just a little bit higher than sheet metal, so I don't think we're going to have any problems. You want to try and keep this pipe in the center of the hole too, so you have enough room for when it goes to flex, it will not bang on the sheet metal anywhere. We'll go ahead and tighten this one up. Normally on this piping, your blow-off valve would go right here. This one's welded shut because we've changed the location of the blow-off valve. It's basically made for the stock Sylvia. You would have the side mount intercooler down here with the recirculation valve. But you could definitely leave your blow-off valve in that location if you'd like. The main thing you want to do before you get to all this, when you're installing your intercooler and making your brackets, you want to make sure it is level at that point. And that way, at this point in the game, you will not have to worry about keeping it level. It's already mounted. This is how our coupler ended up. It's going to work out great. It's not going to hit anything. It's up high enough. And over here on the cold pipe side, you have plenty of room there too. Okay, we're going to install our blow-off valve now. We're using the Grady Type RS. You want to put the gasket in between the two. Bring your bolt in with a washer on it from the flange side. Go through the gasket and then the blow-off valve, and then install your locking washer and then your 10mm nut. The bolt is 10mm as well. You're going to do the exact same thing on the bottom. And go ahead and tighten it down. Just tighten it up to where you feel it will seal properly. Okay, and as you see, we have the Grady intake suction pipe coming in there. You can see that it does not line up properly. because this intake system is made for the T28 turbo where we have the T25. The turbo inlet pipe is a little different, so we're going to use a 45-degree coupler on that to make do for that. Okay, now we're going to install the 45-degree coupler onto the turbo inlet pipe. Make sure you push the coupler all the way back to the stopper on the inlet pipe there. Make sure you position it right too, so it will line up with the intake pipe. Okay, we're using the Grady suction intake pipe. We'll go ahead and put the filter inside the basket. You can replace those filters. Just slides right in there. You want to install the basket with the filter in it onto the adapter there. Press it down. It has a bolt and a washer to install on there. You install the washer on the bolt and screw it down to the basket. It actually holds the basket on. Just hand tighten it on there. You don't have to torque it down or anything. Just put it on there so it will not come off. This is for the Z32 MAF. You want to flip the basket over, and as you can see, there is a gasket made onto the adapter. If you look at the Z32 MAF, we'll go ahead and pull the gasket off, because sometimes you don't get that gasket with your mass airflow sensor. So they made one on there, so you do not need that gasket any longer. Go ahead and install the mass airflow sensor onto the adapter. It comes with 4 10mm nuts. Go ahead and install your 4 nuts on, your 4 10mm nuts. Go ahead and snug them down. Remember that your mass airflow sensor is plastic, so do not over tighten or you will crack it and break it. It doesn't have to be super tight, it will hold it on. This intake system is made for the T28 setup. We're using T25, so it's going to be just a little bit different. You can't use the outlet pipe or the inlet pipe that comes with the system because they will not work. Press it all the way down to the stopper. Install a clamp on there and go ahead and tighten it down. You do not need T-bolt clamps on these. You can just use regular clamps because you are tightening it down to plastic. 8mm clamps. Again, just snug them down. Do not tighten them down super tight because you will crack or break your mass airflow sensor because it is just plastic. Okay, you want to install another clamp onto your coupler. You want to go ahead and install your coupler onto your suction pipe. We're not going to tighten this one up until we get it in the car so we can position the mass airflow sensor. Now, since we're not using the side mount intercooler and we're not running our recirculation to our valve cover, we're going to plug off the ports here. Okay, on the bigger bar we're going to use an inch plug that actually goes inside it, and then you tighten it down and it'll sprawl out and hold it in there. You could even cut these off and weld them closed if you like, because they do get in the way. But for now we're just going to plug them off. Okay, on the smaller bar we're going to use a 3/4 inch plug with a clamp on it. The Grady intake kit comes with a turbo inlet pipe for the T28, where we have the T25. It does not work. We're going to show you that it does not fit. Our inlet pipe is already unbolted. That's why it comes off so easily. But as you see, if you hook the flange up to where it would almost go into the stud, it's hitting the manifold. It actually even needs to go up more than that to hook onto the stud. So it's definitely not going to work. Okay, we're going to bring the intake in now, install it onto the 45-degree coupler. You want to position it. Actually, this barb on the side here is going to hit the power steering line, but it's hitting the plug we put on there, so it'll be just fine. As you can see, it's hitting it right there. That'll be fine. The one on the bottom is going to hit the power steering line from the reservoir to the power steering pump. After you get that lined up, you're going to go ahead and tighten that clamp down on the 45-degree coupler. Now we're going to straighten up our mass airflow sensor and tighten the clamp down. 8mm clamp. This kit comes with a bracket as well to mount it, so it will not wiggle around as much, but like I say, it works for the T28 setup. We have the T25, it will not work, but it's not moving anywhere anyways, so we're not going to use that. Okay, this is what we're going to use to pressurize our system. It's a 2.5-inch pipe cap, and then I've drilled a hole and tapped out for the air inlet. We're going to install it on our 45-degree coupler and tighten the clamp on it. You need to plug off both ports on top of the throttle body. You need to plug off the port on the bottom of the throttle body. You need to plug off this port on your cold pipe. You have to plug this off. We're using our finger for this one. Coming over here, you'll need to plug off your nipple on your hot pipe, wherever you have it. The one on your blow-off valve. It's still going to leak air on the back side just a little bit, but it's alright. It's not going to mess it up enough. Then you can hook your leak down tester to your whatever you use to get it pressure inside your intercooler system. We're using a leak down tester set at 30 psi, and then this end right here is connected to our air compressor, just like we did when we did the leak down test. Okay, we have 30 psi going into our leak down tester. I'm going to stick my finger over the hole to plug it up, let it build pressure. We've got this coupler down here loosened, so it will start leaking, so you can hear it and see it. You hear that? That's the leak. Go ahead and wiggle the pipe. You can justify where it's at by doing that, and also feeling for air. You want to go ahead and tighten up the clamp until that stops. Usually after you get that one stopped, it'll probably start leaking somewhere else. We've already done this whole system, so the rest of them's good. We just loosen this one up to reenact it for you. So you want to tighten up, move it around a little bit, give it some flex, make sure it's not leaking anymore, and you should be good. Normally you wouldn't have to hold this because you would have a hose going from here to here, but we haven't gotten ours yet, so we just plug this one off, and I plug this with my finger. Okay, we have this hole right here on the intake. We're going to plug it up with our finger, and we're going to show you what the pipe will do if you do not tighten it properly. It will pop it off. Let it build pressure. As soon as you hit boost on your car going on the road and your clamp is not tight enough, this is what's going to happen. And that's what's going to happen. Okay, as far as the air fuel controller hookup, if you had the harness plug hooked into the ECU, it would look like this. So basically, looking at the picture I'm going to provide of the ECU pinout, you would take the plug and you would lay it down to the left, where the bump on top would be taller than the bump on the bottom. It's got two bumps on it, one on top, one on the bottom. The one on top is going to be taller than the one on the bottom. As you can see, the one on top is taller than the one on the bottom. So as long as you got the taller one on top, that will be the top. You can go off the ECU pinout that I'm going to provide a picture for. Okay, the first thing we're going to hook up on the air fuel controller is the MAF signal input from the MAF signal. So you actually take the white wire on the ECU, it's number 16 pin, it's a white wire. You cut that wire in half. So you will actually have two wires, one on the ECU side and one on the harness side. And on the white wire towards the harness is the one that's going to hook to your white wire on your air fuel controller. The other side of the white wire on the harness is going to hook to the yellow wire on your air fuel controller. So basically it's tying in the yellow and the white wire from your air fuel controller from the white wire you just cut in half on the harness. Okay, the next wire on your air fuel controller is the gray wire. We're going to tie that to the white wire on pin number 20. It's the TPS wire on the ECU harness. What we're using to connect these is a tap and splice connector. Basically put both the wires in it and clamp it down. That's the way we're doing ours. You can use whatever you like. Okay, the purple wire on the air fuel controller goes to pin number 27 on the ECU harness, which is a white wire. Our wire is faded, so it does not look white, but it is white. It's number 27 pin on the ECU. It's the knock sensor. We're going to use the tap and splice connectors. All you got to do is just slide the uncut wire in on the front side, goes all the way through the connector, and the cut wire goes halfway through and butts up to the wall, and then you smash the metal pin down with whatever, and it locks it down. You do not have to install the knock sensor if you do not want to. You do not need that to get it running. You want to make sure all the wires are in there before you go to smash it down. Smash it all the way down. And when you're done smashing it down, take the lid and flip it over and lock it down. And that's how that works. Okay, on the air fuel controller you have the green wire. It's going to pin number 3 on the ECU harness, which is a yellow wire with a red stripe as your tack signal. On the air fuel controller you have the red wire. It is going to pin number 47, which is a black wire with a white stripe on the ECU harness. That is your power wire. Next is the black wire on the air fuel controller. Goes to pin number 39 on the ECU harness, which is a black wire. But on this wire here, the black wire on the ECU, you're going to have 2 taps on this one. The black wire on the air fuel controller is going to be further away from the ECU. And then next is going to be the brown wire on your air fuel controller. It is going to hook to the exact same wire, but it's going to be closer to the ECU. Let me get you a closer shot of that. Okay, that one there is the one that's closer to the ECU, and then that one there is the one that's further away from the ECU. Okay, for the ECU, you need to take the KA brackets and put them on the SR ECU. The KA is the 28, the SR is the 63. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and mount it. As you can see, the bigger one is on the bottom and the smaller one is on the top. You have 2 10mm bolts to bolt it up, one on top, one on bottom. Okay, now we're going to hook the dash plug up. We're bringing it underneath the dash. Now, as far as the connector, the side that has the push button on it goes towards the inside of the car. It'll be actually facing you. Just press it up in there. And it should click and it goes all in. Okay, now we're going to install the ECU plug. You want to take it and just start it in on the connect. You want to take the connector and start it on the ECU there. Don't press it in hard, just get it started, and then you have a 10mm bolt there. You want to thread that in, and that's how you want to tighten that. That's how you want to tighten that connector in. Because you do not want to bend any prongs on your ECU there, or on the connector itself. Just tighten it up till it snugs up and you're good. Okay, to go to the vacuum lines, on the top of the throttle body, the one on the left goes to the fuel pressure regulator, right there. And we're teeing off of it twice. On the first tee, we're going to the boost gauge. It's running over here to our Defi boost gauge unit right there, which is running inside. Our second tee is running over here to the back of our boost control unit. The barb on the right side is running over to the blow-off valve. Straight to the blow-off valve, no T's in that line. The barb on the bottom of the throttle body will be plugged off. Okay, the nipple on the hot pipe, it should actually be closer to the turbo, but it'll be okay right here. But if you go to put one on, I definitely put it closer to the turbo over here. Maybe even on the outlet pipe of the turbo would probably be a good thing. But it runs from the hot pipe, it runs over here to the boost control unit, to the in of the boost control unit, and then on the out of the boost control unit, it runs straight down to the wastegate, right there. If you're not using a boost controller, you'll just have a barb on your hot pipe and it'll run straight to the wastegate. Because all that's doing is tying that boost controller into that line of the hot pipe to the wastegate. Okay, as far as the vacuum lines, pretty much every hose we're using is a 3/16 hose, all the way everywhere, except for on the Defi boost gauge here, we're using the hose that come with that unit because the barb is just a little smaller than 3/16. They're running over here to a small coupler where we have it tied into the 3/16 hose. We're tie strapping all of our connections everywhere. On the right barb on top of the throttle body, it's going to be a little tight getting the 3/16 hose on there, but it will fit. The barb on the left of the throttle body and the fuel pressure regulator barb is going to be loose, so make sure you get those tie straps really tight on those two connections. And keep a check, make sure they do not come off later. Should be good if you get them tight though. Okay, we have a 3/4 inch hose hooked to the intake here, and we're going to run it to the cold pipe here. Tie strap all your hose connections, just for added insurance. Okay, as far as the catch can, this is how we routed ours. We have the hose coming off. We just have two hoses, two 5/8 inch barbs with 5/8 hoses. Run up the front here. One goes to the Grady intake suction pipe. The other goes to the front of the valve cover and to the block. There's many ways to route this. I'll provide you some pictures on the website. You can go to the website and download the pictures or view them. Okay, we're going to install the flex light fans onto the coil radiator. And watch your hose barb down here. You don't want to get it too low that you won't be able to get on there. And the same with the top. You want to be able to get your hose on there. Have to sit just a little crooked so you can get your hoses on. It will come with these long pieces, a thin washer, and then the other plastic piece. This is going to go down through here, go through the radiator fins. On the back side, you're going to have this piece here up like that in the washer. And this is going to go in through and come out on the other side and lock it down. That's how it's going to work. All you gotta do is take your washer, put it on there, take your other cap where it dips in, that goes towards the radiator. Getting started on there. Hold it while you're pushing the other one in. That's how you do it. You got 6 of them to do. After you get them all installed and get them all tightened up, take your wire cutters, snip them off. Also, if you're using the coil radiator, make sure you get the rubber feet off your stock radiator, because they hook onto the bottom of the car. It keeps the vibration down and everything. It keeps it from banging around. The rubber feet I was just talking about go down these holes right here, there, and there. Okay, we're going to bring the radiator in with the fan installed on it. We're going to watch everything. It's going to hit a bunch of hoses and stuff. slide straight down. Make sure you line the rubber feet up at the bottom. Watch all your wiring and your lines everywhere. Push down on it, make sure your rubber feet's down in the bottom. Now we'll install the stock brackets. We'll run our mass airflow sensor and our power steering wiring underneath here. This bracket we have here is actually missing the rubber that goes inside, so the owner will have to replace that later. Go ahead and install it. Okay, I went ahead and installed the radiator hose on this side. It goes to the coolant neck right there on the motor and goes down to the bottom of the radiator. Again, put your clamps on, tighten them up. Then as far as on top here, you have the smaller that runs from the top of the radiator to the motor. Runs underneath all the hoses and stuff I have here. We're going to use this adapter for our water temperature sensor. So we're going to have to cut this hose. So you want to bring it in and measure out about where you need to cut at. Have 2 black lines there already. Just for this right here. So that's how much hose you're going to cut off to make do for that. And then I'll clamp in on there. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and cut the hose. You want to go ahead and put some Teflon tape on your water temperature sensor, or some liquid thread scent, whatever you want to use. I'm going to go ahead and install your temperature sensor into your adapter here. And screw it on and tighten it up. This one here for the DEF unit is 14mm. As you see inside there, you can see the temperature sensor inside there now. Go ahead and piece all this together now. It'll take a little working to get it on there, but you will get it on there. Then we'll go ahead and take your plug and plug it in. I would run it underneath the mass airflow sensor. Just keep out of the way of everything. Okay, this is what you're left with on the top radiator hose. You have a clamp going to the motor, clamp going to the adapter, clamp on the other side of the adapter, and clamp going to the radiator. And you have your water temperature sensor adapter in there, your water temperature sensor, and then you have a 5mm Allen bolt threaded in for a ground. I brought mine down here where the catch can used to be and grounded it down here, right there. Make sure you scratch the paint off so you get a good ground on that. Okay, on the toggle switch you have power, load, and ground. Our ground is running over here. I'm going to ground to this location right here. Our power wire, this one right here, runs up through the hole up there where we run our sensors for our gauges and everything, goes to the relay. And the load goes to a 12-volt source, like battery or whatnot, which it's running up to our distribution block. And it's running through the firewall just as well. where the gauges came through. And to cut it on, all you do is cut the switch. We have a little bit of a rattle. Piece on the front here is loose. Also, this switch has a LED light on it to tell you that the power is on. And you cut it off and the light goes off. Okay, our switch is coming into our relay right here. It's just a regular standard 40 amp relay with a switch. Basically what we have the power of our switch inside the car coming into the switch here on the relay, which is number 86 on the relay. Coming off of number 30 on the relay, it runs straight to the white wires on the fan, which is power. But you can reverse the polarity of it, and it'll actually blow the fans the other direction, which we want the fans blowing towards the motor, so we got them going this way. And also, our black wires are being grounded down here, right there, along with our temperature sensor for our gauge here, our adapter. Next is number 85 on the relay. It is a ground. It goes right here to this ground where we're using ours. And last on the relay is number 87. We have it tied into the power on our distribution block here. You can definitely clean this up a little better. I'd actually get, since we had to do all this stuff, I'd definitely get a bigger distribution block to be able to hook all this together, which is what we're going to do later, but for now we're just doing this for temporary power. I would never use these connectors and leave them and use them always. These are just for temporary. And right here is where we got our switch coming in to get power on this one right here. That's basically how ours is working. Like I said before, you can get all this stuff to run into the distribution block here, which goes straight back to the battery, since we have a battery relocation. And these right here are our HID lights. This car has HID lights hooked up. And since we have an empty location on our fuse block here, we can just stick it right there and run all the wires together, and the cover will close down on it. Okay, we're going to do the throttle cable now. You want to take your throttle arm, open it wide open. Then as you see on the throttle arm, there's a little slot right here. That's actually what the ball and the wire hook through. We're going to do that right now. Now there's a holder on the intake manifold we're going to run it through. It just slides down in there. There's a 14mm nut on the top or the bottom, whichever one's loosened up enough. You want to tighten down. Make sure it's pressed back all the way. $14mm nuts. Okay, then you want to take the piece of plastic and put it on the front. Just stick it down in the holes. Next, there's a hole down on the intake manifold right there. And just run it through that. Next, there's a little hole down on the brake booster line. And then next, there's another one on the brake booster bracket. Okay, now we're going to install the coolant overflow tank. Two 10mm bolts are going to bolt down. On the strut tower, we have two ground locations that we're going to bolt. Okay, we have two ground wires that we're going to bolt to that. You're going to go ahead and get your other bolt started before you tighten the back one up. You might have to modify that tab on the strut tower. They usually don't fit right. You might have to bend it and drill out the hole a little bit. Next, you want to route your hose to the top of the radiator where the cap is. And then connect the hose to the radiator. This hard line down here that went to the stock catch can goes to the gas tank. It's actually a gas tank vent. You can put a little small filter on there if you like. You can remove this whole hard line and it goes all the way down to where the clutch dampener and everything is down there, which runs to a rubber line and also to another hard line. You can run it to there and just let it vent out there and put a filter on there or whatever, or you can just leave it like it is with no filter and it'll be just fine. You might smell a little bit of a gas smell, but it'll go away. Okay, now we're going to install motor oil. You want to remove your cap. The stock oil pan, if you're using the stock oil pan, it holds 3.5 quarts, 3.5 quarts. The Grady oil pan holds one whole extra quart, so you're going to have 4.5 quarts. 4.5 quarts on the Grady oil pan, 3.5 quarts on the stock oil pan. I recommend using full synthetic motor oil. We're using this cheap stuff for right now because we're going to drain it and replace it. Make sure that your drain plug and everything is all installed and tight before you do this. Make sure your oil filter is in and changed before you do this. Make sure it's tight. Trust me, you can easily forget small things like that going through a swap like this. You want to check and double check everything. Okay, before you go to install your coolant into your radiator, you want to open up this relief valve here. It's a 10mm bolt. You want to go ahead and take that bolt completely out. Okay, after you have that bolt out, you can go ahead and start filling up your radiator. What that's going to do, it's going to let all the air escape out of here. Go ahead and probably put a towel around it, because when it fills up all the way, it's going to pour coolant out of this hole. And as soon as it pours coolant out of this hole, you want to install that 10mm bolt back in and tighten it down. Okay, now you want to take your cap off. Make sure your plug is on the bottom and it's tightened up and everything. Make sure all your hoses are on and tightened up everywhere. You go ahead and take your coolant and start filling it up. You want to pour it kind of slow, just so you don't get so much air in there. Kind of keep it pouring at a constant rate. And when the water starts coming out of the relief valve, you want to plug it up. Okay, as soon as the fluid starts to come out of the hole, you want to stop. Okay, as it's drained out, you want to go ahead and install your 10mm bolt. This is getting all the air released out of it. Make sure you have a pan below and everything. What that does is it gets all the air and air bubbles out of the system. Go ahead and tighten that down. Just snug it down. You don't got to tighten down too much. It's a small bolt, it can break easily. And you want to go ahead and top off your radiator and then your overflow tank. Okay, we're going to cut our switch on and set up our air fuel controller. Just turn it to ACC, do not turn the car on. You will hear that beeping because it's our oil pressure gauge. First thing you want to do is go to eccentric, sensor type, hot wire. For the Z30 MAF, you want 2 in, 5 out. Sensor cowl, 1 in, 1 out. Car select, 4-cylinder with the arrow pointing up to the top right there. You want to do a sensor check. And take your gas pedal, press it down, let it off. As you can see, we're not getting a throttle signal. I believe our TPS is bad on this car. You want to go to settings, your high throttle, turn every RPM range down to -25%, just to start off with. It's going to run rich, and you can tune it later, but you want to start off with -25%. You want to go to low throttle, do the same thing. Turn all the RPMs down, the whole bandwidth to -25% on all of them. Then after everything's set, you should be ready to start your car. You want to cut the switch off and cut the switch back on. And everything should be saved. And it's all saved. you're hooking the air filter control up and you're using the stock MAF, it's 6 in, 6 out. You can set all the high and low throttle RPM ranges at 0. Okay, for our initial start, we're going to unplug the cam angle sensor plug so we can prime the motor with oil. Okay, when you're going to prime the motor with oil, you want to turn the motor over 6 or 7 revolutions, stop, wait a minute, let the starter cool down a little bit, and do it again probably about three times, doing that 3 times. But giving breaks in between to let the starter cool down a little bit so you don't blow a fuse or anything like that. Now just let it all cool down for a little while before you do your initial start. Okay, we'll go ahead and plug our cam angle sensor back in. We're going to do our initial start now. It might run a little rough or whatever. It just depends on what all is going on. But after we get it running and get it up to operating temperature, then we'll do some troubleshooting. We're going to give it a shot with the mass airflow sensor unplugged. I believe it's the ground wire on the mass airflow sensor. The way I have it is as you've seen in the wiring, we have it hooked up to C on the mass airflow sensor. I'm going to cut that wire off and I'm going to ground it to the body and see if that helps. As you see right here, I have the green and the black wire coming off the Z32 MAF plug. I'm going to take the green wire off and ground it to the chassis, because they're both going into the ground wire on the SR harness. We're going to leave the black one going to the black on the SR harness for ground, but we're going to take the green one and ground it to the body of the car. Okay, as you can see here, what I've done is I connected the black wire to the black wire, and I grounded the green wire right there with the black wire. It's just temporary. You don't really want to do anything fancy when you're troubleshooting like this. Plus, I've got the negative cable disconnected from the battery before I start this, which you want to do anyways, but it's also going to reset the ECU, which is something you need to do as well. Now I have the mass airflow sensor plugged back up, and the ground is wired to the body. We'll give it another start and see what happens. Okay, it didn't start, so we're going to unplug the mass airflow sensor again and see if it'll start up. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to take the mass airflow sensor off and spray it with some brake cleaner. Okay, as you can see inside there, there's a little resistor inside there, inside the hole there. That's what you're going to spray with brake cleaner. You don't want to spray too close to it because you might damage it. Just hold the can a little bit away from it, spraying there on it, and let it dry really good before you go install it back. The brake cleaner will dry pretty quickly compared to others, so it'll work really well. It's just regular brake parts cleaner. All you got to do is just take it back a little bit and spray it towards the sensor inside the MAF. Just a little bit. That's all you need to do. And let it air dry before you install it back in. It'll dry up really quick. You probably take a fan and put it in front of a fan a little bit and let it dry out like that. Okay, we got our mass airflow sensor installed again. We're going to give it another shot. Okay, the mass airflow sensor is definitely bad or wired wrong. Okay, now we're going to test our wiring on our mass airflow sensor. We have our multimeter set at ohms, which looks like a horseshoe. We're going to take the black prong and hook it to the black to black connection, the black wire from the mass airflow sensor to the black wire on the harness. We have it soldered right there. Just going to use some alligator clips to clip it on. And we're going to hook the red prong into D, which will be the black wire. And then we're going to get a reading from that on our multimeter. As you can see, we're not, well, now we are. Okay, we've unhooked the alligator clips, and we're going to do this with 2-man just because our wire is a little weird. Sometimes you'll get a signal and sometimes you won't. Of course, as you move the prong over the wire, it's going to show a reading of some sort, but it will go back down to 0. So I'm thinking our soldered connection is bad, so we're going to resolder this and check it again. Okay, we're going to use your multimeter and check your ground from the ECU all the way to the Z32 plug, MAF plug. We're going to check number 17 pin, which is third over on this side. As you can see, we have signal, so we have ground there. And below here I have my black prong using the alligator clip connected to a wire going all the way to the MAF plug in the engine bay. That's how I have that routed. This is how I have it connected to the MAF plug. Have it going right into the plug. It's the black wire on the MAF plug. And this wire is going all the way to the inside the car, to the black prong, which is alligator clipped together. And then my red prong is going to the ECU. Okay, on our air fuel controller, we're not getting any throttle signal at all. I believe that our TPS may be bad, but the first thing we can do is go ahead and remove the Z32 MAF and install the stock SR MAF. And we're going to have to cut the wiring off of the plug and solder in the stock plug and everything. We're going to do all that just to check and make sure everything's correct. We want to get the motor back as stock as possible, just to start from ground A, because there's so many different culprits it could be. That's going to be the best method, is to start with the stock MAF, and then after we get our other TPS in, we'll give that a shot too. Okay, basically what we got here is we have the stock S13 MAF, and we just got the wires tied together and alligator clipped together. You get white to white, black to black, black with a white stripe to black with a white stripe. Just color for color on those. We cut the Z32 plug off and we tying those into there. We just have this filter just pretty much smashed into there. It's just temporary, it's just for troubleshooting. We have a stock coupler here from a KA clamped down to the MAF. We have a alignment tool stuck in the hole here to plug it. I know it looks funny, but it's going to work for now. And we have it clamped to the Grady intake, which is 3-inch. Which if this works out and we're going to keep it stock, we're going to have to get a new intake because this one's too big. And of course we'll have to get a filter and an adapter plate for it. Right now I have the boost controller unhooked. It's not running in line anymore. I just have the hose running from the barb on the hot pipe straight to the wastegate for right now, just for troubleshooting. We have the air fuel controller unhooked and all the wiring back to stock like it would be. We still have a problem with the TPS, might be bad. We haven't swapped that out yet, but we're just going to try this out before we do that. Okay, we're getting ready to start the car after we have replaced our mass airflow sensor and disconnected the air fuel controller and got all the wiring back to normal. I believe our TPS is bad, so that might still have a problem, but we're going to check it, make sure our mass airflow sensor is going to work now. This is the stock one. We'll go ahead and start it up now. I have my cam angle sensor loosened up so I can adjust the timing, advance it or retard it. Go ahead and retard it. You can see the motor's wanting to run a little more slow. As you go to advance it, it goes a little more smoother and a little more faster. We'll leave it right here for right now. Okay, it was obviously the air fuel controller because we have that unhooked and the wiring back to normal. We checked our Z32 MAF out. It checked out. The wiring checked out. It was all good, so it was definitely the air fuel controller. I believe our TPS is bad, and the air fuel controller runs off the throttle, so I'm thinking that might be the culprit to it as well. It either could have been the TPS or the air fuel controller, or both, really. since we have everything stocked the way it is now, we're going to leave it like this. Of course, we're going to change out our throttle body because our throttle arm is bent. Because when we got it from the importer, they obviously dropped it over on that side because all of our fuel lines were bent and everything, and our throttle arm's all bent all up. So when we go to hit the gas, it's not releasing all the way. It's not coming all the way back down. You have to do it manually by hand, so we definitely have to replace that. Okay, we have our new intake installed now. We're using the mushroom filter because as you can see, a regular filter will not fit. It has an adapter that bolts down to the mass airflow sensor, which holds the filter on to the mass airflow sensor. The wiring on it is white to white, black to black, black with a white stripe to black with a white stripe, color coordinated. We have a coupler with 2 clamps. It runs down to here, which we have a 5/8 inch barb on there, which goes to our catch can, just like our Greddy one did. And down below here you have another clamp with 2 clamps, which bolts it to the turbo inlet pipe. This particular pipe here comes with another barb down here, which we have ours plugged off, which you don't need that anyways. Okay, since our motor sounded like it was running off timing a little bit, the first thing we're going to do is check spark. We're going to remove all your coil packs and all your spark plugs. You want to insert your spark plug into your coil pack and just lay it over the side like this. You want to do all 4 of them like that. Okay, now we're going to check for spark. Okay, as you've seen, number 1 and number 2 was firing, but number 3 and number 4 was not. Okay, we're going to turn it over again so you can see it better. Number 1 and 2 sparking, but 3 and 4 is not. There was 1, there was 2, there's 1 again, and there's 2 again. 3 and 4 is not sparking. What we'll do now is we'll swap the coil packs. We'll take the 3 and 4 and swap them with 1 and 2 because we know 1 and 2 is working, but 3 and 4 is not. Okay, now we've swapped our coil packs. We're going to try to start it again, check for spark again. There's 1, there's 2, 1 again. So 3 and 4 is not working again, so it's not the coil packs. We'll go ahead and check the harness next. Okay, we have our coil pack harness removed. What you want to do is take one of your pins, it doesn't matter if it's red or black. You want to set your multimeter to ohms to check for continuity. Some of them have a setting where you can put it on where it beeps, which is what we have ours on. It doesn't matter which prong you use, black or white on whichever one. We're just going to use the red on the plug here. I'm going to put on this prong here and he's going to go through all the connectors. There's 3 prongs on each connector. And as you hear it beeping, that means we have continuity between there. You want to go through all the pins and all the plugs and make sure they're all working properly. Like this one I'm holding here is actually the ground, so you should have continuity on all the connectors on one of the pins. And that will be the only one that will have continuity on all 4 connectors. Just go through like that and that's how you check it. Okay, next up we're going to check our igniter. You want to remove it. It has the 5-pin connector on this side, and on the firewall side of the car it has the 4-pin connector. You can't get it back. You can't get it backwards. It only go in one way. And to check this out with your multimeter, you need to go in the factory service manual on EC202. Okay, now we're going to install a new one. Okay, now we've replaced our igniter, and we're going to try and start the car now. As you can tell, it runs a whole lot smoother and a whole lot better. So this igniter is good. And you can also check it with the multimeter too. Obviously what was happening was that bad igniter was not letting number 3 and number 4 fire, whereas now it is. You can also take your coil packs and spark plugs back out and check spark again also and see if it's firing on all 4. You can check it. You can check your igniter with the multimeter per FSM. You can check your coil packs. The factory service manual pretty much has step by step on how to check anything on this motor. Usually you have to go off the S14 factory service manual because no one has the S13, but it's all basically the same stuff as far as motor wise. Okay, a good way to test your fuel pump to see if it's working is cut your switch on and it'll sound like a motor is running. That'll be your fuel pump priming. Did you hear that? That was your fuel pump priming. Okay, now we're going to do a compression test on this motor. Now it's running and it's warmed up. Go ahead and remove your coil packs. Number 1 and 2 will pull straight up. Number 3 and 4 you're going to have to disconnect the harness on them. Okay, next we're going to remove all the spark plugs on all 4 cylinders. They're going to be hot. They're going to be hot. You might want a glove or something. Okay, next we're going to hook our compression hose up to number 1 cylinder. Just hand tighten it. It's not got to be torqued down. Next we'll hook our compression gauge up to the hose. Okay, next we're going to remove our fuel pump fuse. And we're going to disconnect our cam angle sensor plug. Okay, now we're going to get in the car and start it. You want to turn the car over 5 or 6 revolutions with the gas pedal all the way to the floor. Okay, we have 165 psi on this one. Standard is 150, so we're good on this one. We'll go to number 2 now. Okay, you want to release the air out. And we'll hook up number 2. It's the exact same procedure. Okay, now we'll do the same thing. Gas pedal all the way to the floor, 5, 6 revolutions. Okay, we have 160 psi on this one, so it's good as well. Move on to number 3. We have 160 psi on this one as well, so this one's good. We'll move on to number 4. If you remember when we did a leak down test on this motor, number 3 was a little bit bad. That's probably the valve sticking or a valve seal going bad, because the compression on number 3 was good. We'll see about number 4 because it was really bad on the leak down test. But again, that could be a sticking valve or a bad valve seal. Same procedure, gas all the way to the floor, 5 to 6 revolutions. We have 165 psi on this one, so this one is good as well. So it's definitely either a valve stem sticking or a valve seal going bad, because the compression on all 4 cylinders is good. Like I said, standard is 150, 151 psi. Anything below that is bad. Okay, now we're going to put power steering fluid in. You'll take your cap off. You're going to need to use automatic transmission fluid. You cannot use power steering fluid. That rack will leak with regular power steering fluid, so you need the automatic transmission fluid. Just want to fill it up. Don't fill it all the way up. Just look at your cap and it'll tell you, it'll have a full sign on it. But after you got it full, you want to take your steering wheel and turn it all the way to the left and all the way to the right numerous times. And as the fluid's going down, you want to keep topping off the fluid. And after you get it where it's not going down any further, we'll start the car and we'll do the same process again. Okay, now we're going to start the car up and do the same process. It probably shouldn't go down much at all, if it goes down at all. What you just want to do is get the power steering pump pumping. Continue the same process, keep filling it up while you're turning the wheel all the way to the left and all the way to the right until the reservoir will not go down any further. Okay, to make sure your cam angle sensor is stabbed in correctly, you need to remove your valve cover. I would definitely recommend doing this before you get the motor in the car. So you want to remove your coil packs and your valve cover. You want to set your motor top dead center. On the crank pulley, it is the second notch from left to right. That would be top dead center. You have two top dead centers though. The way to tell you're on the right top dead center is you have a little dot on your cam gear here and here. If you're on the other top dead center, they will be on the bottom. You will not be able to see them. You want to make sure your dot's on top about 11 o'clock and then about almost 1 o'clock on that one. And then as you can see on your cam angle sensor, you have a little notch right here. And then on the inside there, you have a dot. That orange dot needs to be lined up with that notch, just like this one is. And if you look to the left there, you have another little notch right there to the left. This way you'll know your cam angle sensor is installed properly. And like before, I would definitely recommend doing this before you get the motor in the car and before you replace your valve cover gasket. Okay, we're going to do our timing now. We need to take our timing trigger for our timing light and hook it to the loop on the back of the motor here, which is actually your number 1 coil pack wire. Next we have our timing light, which is running down to a set of jumper cables, which is running all the way to the trunk to the battery, because we have the battery relocated. Here on the crank pulley, on the starting from the right to the left, you have 20 degrees, 15 degrees, 10 degrees, and it goes on down through. We're going to set ours at about 15 to 16 degrees, which 15 degrees is right here, the second one from the right to the left. So we're going to set ours about just a little ways over. Basically what you're going to do is look straight down on this needle, from the top straight down, and these notches will be going across while your timing light's flashing on and off, and that's pretty much how it's going to show you to adjust it. But they're going to be bouncing around back and forth like this. You'll see when it starts going, but after a while of your eyes will get used to it and you'll see where it's actually at. It's going to be a little hard to see it. You need to take some black paint or a Sharpie marker and go all around the edge here, so when your timing light's flashing, it'll show these notches up, or else you're not going to be able to see them really well. Okay, when you're going to adjust your timing, you want to loosen your two 12mm bolts on your cam angle sensor, and if you turn it clockwise to the right, that will be advancing the timing, which on your crank pulley, when you look at the notches, it will turn the crank pulley counterclockwise, so to speak, because your notches will go this way when you're advanced timing. Your retard timing will come this way, notches will come this way, and of course you'll turn your cam angle sensor counterclockwise to retard. You want to check the timing with the TPS unplugged so it's not interfering with the idle speed at all. So we'll go ahead and warm the car up now. Okay, we've warmed our engine up, the operating temperatures. We've disconnected our TPS. We're going to go ahead and start the car, and then we're going to connect the timing light to the battery. So we'll go ahead and start the car now. Now we'll go ahead and hook the timing light up to the battery. Now we're going to take our gun and shoot at the crank pulley. You'll see that it flashes. You want to look over the top of this. You want to look over the top of the pin right there. Line the marks up, the notches. You can see the notches going by right there. It's hard to show you because that belt's in the way. That is where it is. It's set at 16 degrees. What we'll do now, we'll go ahead and tighten up our cam angle sensor. Okay, I've removed the AC belt so you can see it better. You can see the notches set at 16 degrees.